Chapter 788. Shuizi stared at Yixing in shock, her gaze fixed on him. He had never expected Yixing to possess such heaven-defying strength. He was already surprised to see Yixing in the top 10 of the 10th peak. Even though he thought that Yixing was at the end of the top 10, it still proved that Yixing's strength was at least at the level of a 3-star king. A 9-star supremacy possessing the strength of a 3-star king was already abnormal enough. In the history of the Dark Star Divine Palace, there were very few people who possessed such strength. If he was the number 1 disciple of the 10th peak, his strength would be even higher. He would probably possess the strength of a 4-star king. Shuizi possessed the strength of a 4-star king. However, he was a 3-star king, the elite of the elites of the first peak. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the number 1 disciple of the first peak was the number 1 disciple of the entire outer sect. Even if he wasn't the strongest, he would definitely be one of the best. Such an existence was enough to look down on all the low-level kings. There were very few people in the entire outer sect who could catch his eye. Originally, Yixing was just a little worm in Shuizi's eyes. Now that he suddenly knew that Yixing was actually a real dragon, this huge contrast shocked Shuizi. He found it hard to believe. Shuizi stared at Gao Jian and said, "You're lying. He's only a 9-star supremacy. How can he be number 1? This is impossible. Impossible." Shuizi's tone was agitated. Many disciples had the same thought as Shuizi. They found it hard to believe. As for the disciples of the 10th summit, they could not help but lift their heads, because what Gao Jian said was the truth, the absolute truth. Seeing the disbelief in the eyes of the disciples of the other 9 peaks, the disciples of the 10th peak finally felt a sense of relief. The 10th peak master, Mo Qingyang, said, "Gao Jian is right. Yixing is indeed the number 1 disciple of the 10th peak." Given Mo Qingyang's status and cultivation, it was impossible for him to lie. Since he had spoken, it was obvious that what Gao Jian had said was true. Some of the disciples from the other 9 peaks were astonished, while others had ashen faces. In retrospect, their mocking remarks just now were nothing short of ironic. This was especially true for Shuizi. He was the one who had mocked Yixing. This feeling of mockery was the strongest, and it made him angry. Shuizi pointed at the disciples of the 10th peak and shouted, "Trash, the disciples of the 10th peak are all trash. Otherwise, how could a 9th-star venerable lord become number 1? There is only one reason, and that is that you are too weak, too trash." The disciples of the 10th summit were furious. Shuizi had said that the 10th summit was full of trash. She was just mocking them. But now, she was pointing at the top 10 disciples of the 10th summit and calling them trash. It was a completely different feeling. Mo Qingyang's face turned ugly. Shuizi had gone overboard. If she had only spoken sarcastically, Mo Qingyang wouldn't have bothered to fight with Mo Wendao. But now, he couldn't bear it anymore. Just as Mo Qingyang was about to get angry, an extremely horrifying aura suddenly descended. The surrounding void suddenly froze. Be it the kings or the quasi-gods, they all felt suffocated. It was as if the void had solidified, making it impossible for them to breathe or move. This horrifying aura only existed for a blink of an eye before disappearing. Everyone felt the air flow in the void again, and they could breathe again. At this moment, everyone noticed a middle-aged man in black robes standing in the void in front of them. No one knew where this middle-aged man in black robes came from. They only knew that they couldn't move or breathe earlier. They were so shocked that even their thoughts seemed to have stopped. By the time they could breathe again and their thoughts were smooth, this middle-aged man in black robes was already standing in the void in front of them. This was a true God expert. This thought flashed through the minds of all the disciples. They had seen quasi-gods before. They could restrain their aura like a mortal and release it like a thunderstorm. However, no matter how strong a quasi-god's aura was, it wasn't as horrifying as the one they had faced in the blink of an eye. Clearly, only a true god expert could have such a horrifying aura that could seal space. Great-grandfather. When Xue Zi saw this middle-aged man in black robes, she was overjoyed and immediately cheered. The 10 peak masters from the first peak to the 10th peak also looked serious. They cupped their fists and bowed to the middle-aged man in black robes. Greetings, Elder Enan. The peak masters of the outer sect had a higher status than the elders of the outer sect. Therefore, these 10 peak masters definitely couldn't ask the elders of the outer sect to bow. It was obvious that this middle-aged man in black robes was an inner sect elder. Only true god experts could become an inner sect elder of the Dark Star Temple. Xue Zi called this middle-aged man in black robes great-grandfather. Clearly, this true god expert was from the Xue family. The Xue family only had one true god expert, Xue Nan. Xue Nan looked like he was only about 40 years old. In fact, he had lived for more than 16,000 years. A true god expert's lifespan was 30,000 years. 16,000 years old was the peak of his prime. Xue Nan looked around and nodded slightly to the 10 peak masters. He waved his hand and a void-crossing divine boat appeared. He said, "This time, I will send you to the entrance of the heavenly Bao continent. Get on the divine boat." When Xue Nan's gaze landed on Xue Zi, it was no different from the other outer sect disciples. He had lived for more than 16,000 years. His sons, grandsons, and even great-grandsons had all turned to dust. He had seen generations of geniuses in his family grow. However, in the end, none of them became true gods. Some died in the middle of their cultivation, and some died of old age after a few thousand years. A person who had lived for such a long time had no family by his side. He had even passed the stage of missing them. His heart was already as calm as water. Unless there was a genius in his family who had a high chance of becoming a true god, Xue Nan would look at him differently. Otherwise, he wouldn't pay attention to him. In Xue Nan's heart, the only difference between his family members and other martial artists was that he didn't care about the life and death of other martial artists. However, he would slightly pay attention to the life and death of the Xue family members. As such, unless the Xue family members were in life-threatening danger, and it was the life and death of an important person in the family, Xue Nan would only pay attention to them. Other than that, he was no different from other martial artists. As for the young man who called him great-grandfather, he naturally couldn't be bothered to look at him. As a 5-star family, the Xue family had a long history. Just Xue Nan's bloodline alone had split into countless branches and tens of thousands of people. In addition, there were also Xue Nan's brothers, cousins, and clansmen. The total number of people was more than 10 million, the number of people who called him great-grandfather was uncountable. How could he look at them one by one? Chapter 791. Xue Zi stared at Yixing, wanting to see fear in Yixing's eyes. However, he was disappointed. Yixing's expression was calm as usual. Xue Zi exuded a terrifying aura as he said slowly, "You should be afraid." Xue Zi was also a 3-star king, but his aura was much more powerful than Tu Qianzhang and Jing Haoyu's. Just his aura alone created an invisible force field, causing the surrounding void to distort. The terrifying aura surged toward Yixing with a force that could topple mountains and overturn seas. In the void, the airflow could be seen moving with the naked eye, creating turbulent and surging airwaves. If it was another 9-star venerable lord, they might not even be able to stand steadily in the turbulent airwaves. However, Yixing's figure did not move at all. With the arrow intent attached to his body was like an arrow with terrifying penetrative power. The turbulent airwaves hit Yixing's body like a balloon hitting the tip of a needle. There was no effect other than the airwaves shattering. Yixing's black hair fluttered in the airwaves, and his expression was calm as he said, "Xue Zi, your great ancestor personally told me to avoid killing fellow disciples in the Heavenly Bow continent. You even dare to disobey the words of a true God powerhouse. You're really bold. Shuizi took Yixing's words as fear and couldn't help but laugh out loud. Yixing, you're really afraid. Ha ha ha. However, you want to use my great ancestor as a shield. No way. If I kill you today, who will know? You're just an insignificant person from a mid-level continent. Who will care about your life and death? You can rest assured that if you die in the Heavenly Bow continent, no one will care about how you die. No one will even mention you. Yixing shrugged and said, what if I kill you? Shuizi was stunned and then laughed. What did you say? You kill me. Ha! Yixing, you're a mere 9th star exalt, yet you dare say that you can kill me. I, Shuizi, am the #1 disciple of the first peak. Do you think that I'll be as useless as that good-for-nothing from the 10th peak? Yixing said indifferently, that depends on how you compare. Compared to them, you are naturally stronger. But in front of me, perhaps you are just a piece of trash. Perhaps you can't even withstand a single blow. Enough! Shuizi shouted angrily. He couldn't bear to listen to Yixing's words any longer. Yixing, don't try to win a battle of words here. There's no need to stall for time. Since you dare to go against me, Shuizi, you're doomed to die today. Even God can't save you. Whoosh! As she spoke, a beam of starlight shot out from between Shuizi's eyebrows and turned into a lightning star. This was a purple lightning astral image. Purple lightning flashed, revealing a terrifying aura that made one's heart palpitate. It was the Thunder Saint level astral form, the Thunder Punishment astral form. The Thunder astral form was extremely good at attacking. Among the same level of astral forms, its attacking power was the most ferocious. A Saint-level Thunder astral form was definitely one of the top Saint-level astral forms. The Thunder Punishment astral form was one of the main reasons why Shuizi was so strong. The Thunder Punishment astral form rained down purple lightning energy that contained the power of life and death. It was terrifying. Shuizi's body was also overflowing with electricity as she circulated the high mystic level Purple Thunder Manual. The 6th level of the Purple Thunder Manual had extremely powerful lightning astral energy. Together with the Thunder Punishment astral form, it made it easy for Shuizi to challenge those with a higher level. 99% of 4-star kings were no match for Shuizi. Only the top 4-star kings had the strength to contend with Shuizi. In the Dark Star Godly Palace, there were no more than 3 people who had the strength of a top 4-star king. Shuizi was one of them. This was the reason why Shuizi was so proud. He was qualified to look down on any disciple of the 10th peak. According to the past, the top disciple of the 10th peak would only have the strength of a normal 4-star king. Even when they were strong, they would only have the strength of a middle 4-star king. As for the strength of a late 4-star king, there had only been 4 or 5 times in the past 100,000 years. This was a chance that only happened once every 10,000 years. Even if Yixing was really the strongest disciple of the 10th peak in the past 10,000 years and had the strength of a late 4-star king, Shuizi still didn't think much of him. In Shuizi's opinion, no matter what, he was the side that would win. There was no way he could lose in killing Yixing. Go to hell. Shuizi took out an upper mystic weapon sword and waved it. Lightning astral energy, lightning yuan qi, lightning aura, purple lightning astral energy. All kinds of energy gathered in this sword and released an extremely bright lightning sword energy. The lightning sword energy twisted like a purple dragon. Wherever it passed, the earth cracked and the void shattered. It carried a destructive aura as it attacked Yixing. The power of this sword energy was several times stronger than Tu Qianzhang's and Jing Haoyu's full power attack. Facing this sword energy, there were very few 4-star kings who could block it. Yixing had already used the fire star form and 3 heaven and earth auras. Dark Yuan Qi, Fire Yuan Qi, and Wind Yuan Qi gathered outside his body and formed a black flame whirlpool. The upper mystic weapon, Red Flame Bow, appeared in Yixing's hand. Activating the Dark Wind Fire Arrow incantation, Yixing's strength exploded to the limit as he waved the Red Flame Bow and drew out a black hole whirlpool. The black hole whirlpool contained a terrifying devouring power. The arrow intent shuttled through the whirlpool at high speed, shattering any objects or energy that were sucked into the black hole whirlpool. Boom boom boom, the lightning sword energy fell into the black hole whirlpool and let out a terrifying explosion. A large portion of the lightning sword energy was shattered and disintegrated by the black hole whirlpool. However, Xuezi's sword energy seemed to have endless power. The twisted lightning sword energy was continuously waved out. The earth and void in front of it cracked as the terrifying power surged forward like a tsunami. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the black hole whirlpool exploded, and a terrifying shockwave rushed out in all directions. The lightning sword energy's power was too terrifying. The black hole whirlpool couldn't withstand it at all. The lightning sword energy was like a dancing dragon. It shattered the black hole whirlpool and ruthlessly slashed down at Yixing whoosh. Yixing's arrow intent was attached to his body. Using his body as an arrow, he instantly pierced through the void and appeared 100 miles away. At this moment, the lightning sword energy slashed out dozens of miles. The mountain peak was flattened, and a huge fissure that was hundreds of meters deep appeared on the ground. The sword energy's power was indeed terrifying, but in the end, it missed and couldn't touch Yixing. Xuezi frowned. Yixing's speed was unexpectedly fast. It was beyond his expectations. With arrow intent attached to your body, your speed is indeed very fast. However, how many of my attacks can you dodge? Xuezi shouted coldly, and a sharp aura burst out from his body. Suddenly, a Nihility Chi sword burst out from his body. It was sword intent. Using sword intent, Xuezi's aura rose to another level. Chapter 792. The penetrating power of the arrow intent was strong, but the sword intent was even sharper. Xuezi's sword intent was attached to his body, and the void outside his body instantly shattered. Xuezi's body was like a peerless sword, extremely sharp. He moved at extreme speed, and the void airflow had almost no resistance to him. Kill! Xuezi rapidly approached Yixing and waved his sword again. The lightning sword aura burst out, containing the sword intent, and its destructive power was even more terrifying. In the distance, Yixing had just pulled open the crimson flame bow, condensing it into a black flame arrow and shooting it out. The lightning sword aura slashed down, and the black flame arrow was instantly split in half. The sword aura's momentum did not decrease, and it continued to attack Yixing. Yixing's current strength was not ordinary among 4-star kings, but it was not too powerful either. He could not be compared to the peak 4-star kings, so naturally, he was not Xuezi's opponent. Whoosh! Yixing could only attach the arrow intent to his body and use the momentum of the wind to the extreme, using his extreme speed to dodge. In just a breath's time, Xuezi had attacked more than 10 times, and all of them were dodged by Yixing. The two retreated as they fought, and they had already retreated more than 200 miles. Your body is only made of flesh and blood after all. I want to see how many times you can use the arrow intent to travel through the void. Hee hee. Xuezi sneered. The reason why the arrow could have such a high speed after leaving the bow was because the bow's power was strong enough. When the bow shot the arrow's speed would naturally increase greatly, but the arrow itself would also have to bear the power. Therefore, a strong bow needed a good arrow. If the quality of the arrow was too low, the arrow would not be able to bear the power, and it would explode before hitting the target. With the arrow well attached to the body was like an arrow. Naturally, the speed was incomparably fast, as if it was teleporting. However, in this process, the body was like the arrow, bearing a huge amount of force. If there was a slight mistake, such as the force bearing exceeded the body's limit, the body would explode like the arrow. The reason why Yi Xing could travel through the void with the arrow intent was because of his strong physical body. However, there was a limit to the strength of his physical body. After a few times, he couldn't take it anymore. Therefore, even though Yi Xing was as fast as teleportation and constantly dodged Xuezi's lightning swords, Xuezi was not angry. Instead, she was very happy. He knew very well that Yi Xing's speed could not be maintained indefinitely. Another breath of time passed. Yi Xing was still dodging as fast as before, but he could already feel a tearing pain coming from his body. The strength that his body could withstand had already reached a critical point. Xuezi stood in the air with purple lightning surrounding his body. He looked like a thunder god. The thunder punishment astral form poured down a torrent of thunder and lightning astral power, giving him endless power. Every sword attack was at the peak of his power. You can't take it anymore, right? Then die. Xuezi saw through Yi Xing's background and her expression was filled with excitement and joy. You're the one who forced me. Yi Xing's eyes suddenly shone brightly. He shouted, I've tolerated you time and time again. You're the one who's seeking your own death. Whoosh! As he spoke, a starlight rushed out from Yi Xing's forehead and turned into a huge bow that floated in the air. The bow was made up of countless small stars, revealing a surging penetrative power. It was the Sagittarius constellation. As Yi Xing's horizons broadened, he became more aware of the scarcity and preciousness of constellations. Even in the Dark Star Temple, Yi Xing had never heard of anyone possessing a constellation. In the Dark Star Temple, Yi Xing had also read some common martial arts manuals. Generally speaking, most of the kings had the extreme grade astral form. Quasi-gods had the extreme grade astral form and the saint grade astral form. True gods all had the saint grade astral form. As for the extreme grade astral form, no matter where it was a legend. Therefore, after arriving at the Dark Star Temple, Yi Xing warned himself not to use the black hole astral form and the Sagittarius constellation unless it was absolutely necessary. But now, Yi Xing had been forced to a dead end by Xuezi. It was impossible for Xuezi to stop. If he didn't use the extreme grade astral form, Yi Xing would only end up dead. Therefore, Yi Xing had no other choice but to use the extreme grade astral form. And Yi Xing used the Sagittarius constellation, which meant that he would kill Xuezi and not leave her alive. Xuezi's mouth curled up. He wanted to sneer at Yi Xing's anger. However, when Yi Xing used the Sagittarius constellation, Xuezi's smile froze on his face before he could even laugh. His pupils dilated, and his heart trembled. As a disciple of a five-star family, Xuezi naturally knew what the Sagittarius constellation represented, 10,000 flames thunder. Using the Sagittarius constellation, Yi Xing immediately felt a surge of power. He waved the crimson flame bow, bringing out a terrifying flaming bow shadow. The explosion shook the heavens. The unstoppable lightning sword aura collided with the flaming bow shadow, causing a huge explosion. The surging waves of air rushed out 10 miles in an instant. A layer of the ground was shaved off by the force, and sand and stones flew everywhere. The flaming bow shadow and the lightning sword aura were both destroyed. This attack was evenly matched. However, Xuezi's face turned green in an instant. Her eyes revealed a trace of shock. Xuezi had already exploded with her peak strength, but Yi Xing had only used the bow and had yet to draw it. Xuezi obviously knew that the terrifying part of an archer expert was the arrow, and not the strength of the bow. The stronger the bow, the more terrifying the arrow would be. Whoosh! Without giving Xuezi time to think, Yi Xing instantly drew the bow. A layer of black flame ripples burst out, instantly cutting the space within 10 miles in half. Xuezi was in a state of shock. Facing such a fast attack, she was shocked and flustered. Her body immediately retreated, and at the same time, she waved her sword. The lightning sword aura danced like a divine dragon and destroyed the black flame ripples. At this moment, an extremely penetrating aura suddenly enveloped Xuezi, causing her face to instantly turn pale. When Xuezi retreated, Yixing also retreated, and drew the crimson flame bow again. This time, Yixing did not instantly release the bow, but drew it into a full moon. On the bowstring, the arrow intense star aura, darkness, wind, and fire elemental energies gathered. When Xuezi slashed the black flame ripples, the black flame arrow on the crimson flame bow had already condensed and locked onto Xuezi. The aura from the black flame arrow made Xuezi's heart tremble. This was definitely an extremely terrifying arrow. Whoosh! The black flame arrow instantly left the bowstring. In the blink of an eye, Xuezi's face turned pale. The arrow had left the bowstring in an instant. Xuezi knew that she could not block the arrow's speed, so she quickly dodged to the side. However, the void had become sticky at this moment. She felt that the air was like water, and the resistance had greatly increased. The speed in the air was completely different from the speed in the water. Xuezi's reaction was a moment slower. Chapter 793. Whoosh! The black flame arrow arrived in an instant and shot into Xuezi's head. The terrifying power contained in the arrow exploded in an instant. Xuezi's body was the body of a king, and the hardness of his skull was comparable to a mid-grade dark weapon. However, the terrifying power still blasted a fist-sized hole in his head, and one of his eyes was gone. Xuezi's vitality was very strong, and he was not instantly killed by this terrifying attack. His other eye was filled with fear and disbelief. Sagittarius constellation. Initial form of binding space. How is this possible? Xuezi's voice was filled with fear as he muttered a few words. The color of life in his eyes quickly faded away, and with extreme unwillingness and shock, he died. His body fell from the sky and landed on the ground. There was no longer any sign of life. Although he killed Xuezi, Yixing's mental vigilance did not decrease. His senses were very sensitive, especially after using the Sagittarius constellation. His aura was even more sensitive, and he felt that someone was watching him. At this moment, the sky suddenly surged, like boiling water. A ray of light bloomed from a certain point, and instantly expanded, covering the entire sky. A line of words appeared from the point of light, and instantly became bigger, and stretched across the sky. "Young man, I'll be waiting for you in the heavenly bow hall." Yixing was shocked. What's going on? Is this something you're saying to me? Yixing was both shocked and confused. He did not understand what was going on. At this moment, tens of thousands of miles away, on the peak of a mountain, Huyanlong suddenly retracted her gaze and closed her eyes. 2 lines of blood tears flowed from her eyes. Just now, she used her eye technique to watch the battle between Yixing and Xuezi. Very few people knew that Huyanlong and Xuezi were engaged. When their martial arts potential reached the end, and their cultivation reached its peak, they would get married. Huyanlong was clear about Xuezi's plan, so she used her eye technique to watch the battle from afar. However, in the end, it was Xuezi who was defeated and died in the Yellow Springs. Not only was Xuezi in disbelief, Huyanlong was also in disbelief. Yixing killed her fiancé, so Huyanlong hated Yixing to the extreme. However, after Xuezi's death, a ray of light suddenly bloomed in the sky. The light was so resplendent and dazzling that in an instant, Xuezi felt intense pain in her eyes. She quickly retracted her gaze and closed her eyes, but she was still injured. Yixing, you actually have the Sagittarius constellation. You really hid it well. Unfortunately, this secret was still discovered by me. Just you wait, I will definitely make sure you have no burial place. I will definitely. 2 lines of bloody tears hung on his face. Hu Yanlong cursed in his heart. At the same time, in the most central region of the Heavenly Bow continent, the earth split open, mountains crumbled, and the earth in a radius of 10,000 li shook and was leveled. An ancient palace rose from the crack in the earth and appeared on the ground. The palace was more than 1,000 meters tall and more than 1,000 feet in both length and width. Its grandeur was even greater than the main hall of the Dark Star Temple. A surging wave spread out in all directions with the ancient palace as the center. At this moment, all the martial artists in the entire Heavenly Bow continent felt the wave. Yixing also felt it, but his eyes were fixed on the sky. He stared at the line of words without blinking. Could it be, these words are really meant for me? Where is the Heavenly Bow Palace? Who is waiting for me? What kind of existence has such means to create such a scene in the sky? Yixing was puzzled and puzzled. In the sky, the line of words existed for 2 breaths of time before it shrunk and disappeared. It returned to its original position. At this moment, the strong light that enveloped the entire sky dimmed. Yixing's expression changed as he suddenly made a discovery. As the strong light gradually dimmed and the area shrunk, Yixing finally saw its outline. It was the Heavenly Bow continent. Yixing had a map of the Heavenly Bow continent in his hand. It was exactly the same as the outline in the sky. The point where the light bloomed, the point where the words appeared, happened to be the center of the Heavenly Bow continent. Could it be that that's the Heavenly Bow Palace? Yixing's heart skipped a beat. The strong light in the sky quickly dissipated and returned to normal. However, Yixing had already understood something. He was ready to leave this area and go to the center of the Heavenly Bow continent to take a look. At this moment, Yixing finally reacted. He seemed to have sensed a wave just now. The direction of the wave coincided with the center of the Heavenly Bow continent. Yixing flew in the air and appeared beside Shuezi's corpse in the blink of an eye. The super brain activated and scanned Shuezi. The destiny flame in Shuezi's head had not been extinguished. Shuezi's destiny flame was blue. There were a total of 5 flames. This was the destiny of a 5-star quasi-god. As long as there were enough resources to cultivate, a 5-star quasi-god's destiny would definitely become a 5-nirvana quasi-god in the future. Moreover, with Shuezi's family strength, it would not be difficult to help him break through to the 6-nirvana quasi-god. Although the hope of becoming a true god powerhouse was very slim, if he could become a 6-nirvana quasi-god, he would be a peak existence below true gods. Even in the Dark Star Temple, he would have a very high status. Shuezi should have had a very good future. Unfortunately, he should not have been arrogant. Because of his arrogance, he looked down on disciples from mid-level continents. Because of his arrogance, he looked down on disciples from mid-level continents. Because of his arrogance, he treated Yixing like dirt. Because of his treatment of Yixing like dirt, he wanted to trample Yixing to death whenever there was a conflict between him and Yixing. But in the end, he lost his life. Yixing's destiny was a 9-star blue destiny. This kind of destiny was considered very good in mid-level continents, but it was very ordinary in the Dark Star continent. A 5-star blue destiny could greatly increase his destiny flame. Whoosh! A ray of starlight shot into the sky, turning into a black vortex. The black hole astral aspect released boundless darkness, enveloping all directions. It produced a terrifying devouring power that rapidly devoured Shuezi's destiny flame. In Yixing's mind, the destiny flame continued to grow. The 9 flames gathered together, turning into a blue flame. Then, the blue flame turned from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, finally, it turned into 5. Yixing's destiny flame had evolved to a 5-star blue destiny. In the Dark Star continent, this was the destiny flame of an extremely talented genius. The evils we bring on ourselves are the hardest to bear. Yixing looked at Shuizi's corpse inside. With a wave of his hand, he took Shuizi's storage ring. Then, the grand perfection stage of fire force activated a sea of fire origin energy that enveloped Shuizi's body. The flames burned and crackled. Before long, Shuizi was burned to ashes. Chapter 794. Asterisk whoosh, asterisk Yixing flew in the sky. The great perfection stage of wind force was activated, and the surging wind force gathered around him. His speed was extremely fast. In a second, Yixing flew dozens of miles in the sky, reaching a speed that was dozens of times faster than the speed of sound. Although his speed was slower than the arrow in 10th possession, it was still much faster than the speed of a beginner stage King Realm cultivator. Yixing was rushing towards the center of the Heavenly Bow continent. Judging from the scene in the sky, the Heavenly Bow Palace should be at the center of the Heavenly Bow continent. To be able to create such a huge commotion in the sky, Yixing guessed that a quasi-god probably did not have such ability. Only a true god powerhouse could do it. The Heavenly Bow continent was the burial ground of the true god powerhouse, Luo Tiangong. Martial artists above beginner stage king were blocked by restrictions and could not enter. Therefore, the only true god powerhouse who could leave behind a method in the Heavenly Bow continent could only be Luo Tiangong himself. Yixing also guessed the reason why the words appeared in the sky. Perhaps it was related to his Sagittarius constellation. This was because he had been in the Heavenly Bow continent for some time. These words did not appear at first, but they appeared after he used the Sagittarius constellation. There should be a connection between them. Luo Tiangong was an archery powerhouse, and the Sagittarius constellation was the highest constellation for archery martial artists. Therefore, the Sagittarius constellation triggered the method left behind by Luo Tiangong. This made sense. Luo Tiangong was someone from 20,000 years ago. To be precise, he died 20,000 years ago. The lifespan of a true god powerhouse was very long, and the limit was 30,000 years. Therefore, Luo Tiangong should have been around 20,000 years ago. As a famous true god powerhouse, since he left behind a method to guide Yixing to the Heavenly Bow Palace, it was very likely to be related to his inheritance. Of course, Yixing had to go and take a look. The inheritance left behind by a top true god powerhouse was not inferior to the orthodox Dark Star Divine Palace. Only the Palace Master was qualified to inherit the orthodox Dark Star Divine Palace. The rest, even the upper echelons of the Divine Palace, could only learn 20 to 30% of it. This showed how precious this inheritance was. Yixing had a strong desire for this legacy. Yixing was not the only one heading towards the center of the Heavenly Bow continent. Just now, all the martial artists in the Heavenly Bow continent had sensed the fluctuations that the Heavenly Bow Palace had emitted. Other than a small number of martial artists who were still searching, most of the disciples from the 3 great temples had already rushed to the center of the Heavenly Bow continent. The disciples of the 10th peak were no exception. However, Yixing's speed was slightly faster. He went forward alone while the other 9 people went together. This was because they were heading towards the central region of the Heavenly Bow continent and would definitely meet the other disciples of the Divine Halls. After an hour, Yixing had already flown a few 100,000 li and reached the center of the Heavenly Bow continent. However, he was still a few 100,000 li away from the Heavenly Bow Hole. Stop! Stop! A voice came from afar. To Yixing's left, several 100 kilometers away, a group of cultivators was shouting at Yixing. This was a team of 5 people, and they were not disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace. A few 100 li was a very short distance for a king. However, Yixing's speed was faster than theirs, so he ignored them. Although both parties were heading in the same direction, after 10 breaths, they had changed from moving side by side to one in front and one behind. Moreover, the distance between both parties was still increasing. Damn it, a 9-star venerable lord can actually move so fast. He must have some extraordinary treasure that can increase his speed. Send a message to Sima Ning to stop him in front. After a few hundred breaths, Yi Xing had flown a few thousand li ahead. Suddenly, 5 figures rushed out from the front and lined up in a row, blocking Yi Xing's path. Swoosh, 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 the 5 of them took out a formation flag at the same time. In the blink of an eye, the small formation flag grew to a few hundred feet tall and stood in 5 different directions in the sky. A translucent light shield appeared in an instant, covering the void within a few hundred li. When the 5 of them threw out the formation flag, Yi Xing's arrow intent was attached to his body. He shuttled through the void and appeared more than 100 li away in an instant. However, it was useless. Yi Xing was still in the light shield formed by the formation flag. Yi Xing observed for a while. This was an ordinary level 5 formation flag that could trap a low-level king. The 5 of them were all 3-star kings, and 2 of them were peak 3-star kings. From the symbol on their clothes, he could tell that they were disciples of the Radiance Divine Palace. Among the 3 divine temples, the relationship between them was not very harmonious. Among them, the Dark Star Divine Temple and the Radiance Divine Temple had the worst relationship. Most of the time, the Starry River Divine Temple played the role of a peacemaker, although it always did not please either side. Hee hee. It's the disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace. There was a symbol on the sect's clothes. The other party could also tell that Yi Xing was from the sect. Among the 5 of them, one of them was obviously a peak 3-star king. He looked at Yi Xing and said with a smile, "A mere 9-star venerable lord dares to walk alone in the heavenly Bao continent. Hee hee. I wonder if it's you who is brave. Or are you too stupid?" Yi Xing looked behind him. The 5 people who were chasing him were still far away from him. They would not be able to catch up with him in less than 10 breaths. Yi Xing retracted his gaze and glanced at the 5 of them. He said, "Who are you? You know that I dare to walk alone, but you still dare to stop me. I also want to ask, is it you who is brave, or are you too stupid?" Yi Xing's words were very domineering. However, the 5 of them obviously did not take him, a 9-star venerable lord, seriously. In their opinion, even if a 9-star venerable lord's combat strength was heaven-defying, how strong could he be? Therefore, Yi Xing's words only caused the 5 of them to burst into laughter. Yi Xing said indifferently, "In my opinion, it's not a wise move to deal with a cultivator walking alone in the heavenly Bao continent for no reason. Now, open the formation and let me leave. Then, we'll mind our own business. This is the sensible choice. Senior brother Sima, this kid is too pretentious. Let me deal with him." A late 3-star king said to the peak 3-star king, Sima Ning. "Don't be hasty." Sima Ning waved his hand and said to Yi Xing, "It's not impossible for you to leave. Hand over your storage ring and I'll let you go immediately." Yi Xing calculated the time. It was about time. If he delayed any longer, the 5 people behind him would catch up and he would be besieged by the 10 of them. Yi Xing said, "Sometimes, it's not that there are no opportunities in life, but that you can't grasp them. Now, the opportunity to mind our own business is gone." Whoosh! A terrifying aura erupted from Yi Xing's body. 3 types of worldly forces, in addition to the aura of arrow intent. Although Yi Xing was a 9-star venerable lord, the aura that erupted from him was even more powerful than a 3-star king. Chapter 795. Sima Ning and the other 4 were surprised. They did not expect a 9th-star venerable lord to have such a terrifying aura. However, this did not mean that they were afraid. When Yixing was able to enter the Heavenly Bao continent, they already knew that Yixing had the strength of one of the top 10 peaks in the Outer Sanctum. Although his aura was terrifying, he was only a 9-star venerable lord. In their opinion, Yixing should be at the bottom of the top 10. They were not afraid even if he was the first or second disciple of a peak. This was because Sima Ning was also the second disciple of a peak in the Radiant Shrine. His strength had reached the level of a late 4-star king. Among the other 5 people who were coming, there was also the first disciple of their peak. His strength was comparable to a peak 4-star king. With such a lineup, they could even kill the top disciple of the Dark Star Temple. Naturally, they did not care about a 9th-star venerable lord like Yixing. Sima Ning grunted coldly and said, refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Wei Yan, kill him. The late 3-star king who said that he wanted to deal with Yixing laughed. His aura exploded, and the surrounding void shook. Whoosh! Wei Yan had used the earth element astrology, and it was an extreme earth element astrology. The yellow earth element astrology fell on the golden mace in Wei Yan's hand. Boom! Wei Yan pulled out his mace, and with the force of 10,000 soldiers, he viciously struck at Yixing like a collapsing mountain. Yixing instantly activated his fiery astral aspect. Wind origin energy gathered around him, and with a whoosh, he shifted his position. His speed was as fast as lightning, allowing him to evade Wei Yan's attack. At the same time, Yixing pointed his finger and the astral arrow in 10 burst out. It contained the 3 forces of darkness, wind, and fire. It formed a black flame finger and shot out like an arrow. Yixing's body was fast enough, but the astral finger arrow was even faster. Wei Yan's strength was not at the peak of a 3-star king. He was inferior to Sun Gang and Lu Li. His strength was in strength and defense, not speed. Facing Yixing's sudden counterattack, how could he dodge it? Whoosh! The black flame astral finger instantly shot towards Wei Yan's forehead. The defensive power that Wei Yan was so proud of was completely useless in front of the black flame astral finger that had the penetrative power of an arrow. Whoosh! Under Wei Yan's horrified gaze, the black flame astral finger pierced through his protective aura and into his forehead. Ah! Wei Yan let out a blood-curdling scream as blood instantly spurted out. The power contained in the black flame astral finger exploded in his head, creating a thumb-sized bloody hole. The inside of his head was completely shattered by the terrifying power, and his life force was rapidly draining away. Junior brother Wei. Sima Ning and the others were greatly shocked and hurriedly exclaimed. At this moment, all Wei Yan felt was a soul-piercing pain. He clutched his head with both hands and howled miserably. His body fell downwards, landing on the flat surface formed by the array formation. Very soon, Wei Yan could not even howl anymore. His entire body was convulsing, and it was obvious that he was about to die. Sima Ning and the others had never imagined that Yixing would be so dangerous. His reaction speed and the penetrative power of the black flame astral finger made it seem like he could take someone's life in the blink of an eye. Perhaps Yixing's strength did not exceed Sima Ning and the others' expectations, but Yixing's lethality was beyond their expectations. Lethality was not equal to strength. For example, Sima Ning was much stronger than Wei Yan, and the strength that Yixing had just displayed did not enter Sima Ning's eyes. However, if Sima Ning were to attack Wei Yan, it would be very difficult for him to kill him in one move. It was not that he did not have strength, but that his lethality was not enough. Save junior brother Wei. Sima Ning coldly shouted and immediately used his astrology. His strength erupted as he charged towards Yixing. Sima Ning's astrology was the saint-level ice viper astrology. This was an icy astrology that was covered in white snow. Above the astrology, there was a huge shadow of an ice viper that breathed in and out white mist. It was as if all the cold chi in the entire astrology was coming from this ice viper. The Ice Viper astrology was the pinnacle of water-type astrology. Just the extreme cold chi that leaked out of it was enough to make even a 4-star king feel troubled. Sima Ning wore a black level high-grade glove on his hand. His palm was like a blade as he chopped down towards Yixing. Frigid astral energy, frigid momentum, frigid astral energy, frigid astral energy. All kinds of energy converged and formed a huge ice blade. The ice blade carried extreme coldness and instantly froze everything within 100 miles. Everywhere was filled with bone-chilling coldness. Although Sima Ning's strength was not as strong as Shuizi's, it was still very terrifying. Yixing could severely injure Wei Yan in one move, but it would be difficult for him to deal with Sima Ning's move. The cold chi froze everything within 100 miles. Yixing felt that the blood in his body seemed to be flowing slowly because of this cold chi. The extreme level of fire astrology could not dispel this cold chi at all. Under this freezing chi, Yixing could not use his speed at all and could not dodge this attack. The power contained in the ice blade astral wind was not something that Yixing could contend with. Die! Sima Ning roared. With this palm strike, he wanted to end Yixing Huan's life with a single strike. Whoosh! A ray of starlight shot out from Yixing's forehead and turned into a huge starlight bow in the sky. Yixing used the Sagittarius astrology. The Sagittarius astrology that contained extreme penetrating power dropped down. The cold chi around Yixing was instantly cut into pieces. The extreme level of the Flame constellation could not do anything to the Ice Viper constellation's freezing chi, but the Sagittarius constellation was the highest constellation. How could the Ice Viper constellation be able to freeze it? Wherever the Sagittarius constellation's star power fell, the freezing chi would shatter. The ice seal was gone. Yixing could use his extreme speed to dodge Sima Ning's move. But Yixing did not. 10,000 Fire Thunder. The crimson flame bow appeared in Yixing's hands. The dark wind fire arrow technique was activated. Yixing used the most violent and tyrannical bow technique. Boom! A flaming bow shot out. The space in front of it shattered and the explosion was like thunder. The flaming bow collided with the ice blade astral wind. The terrifying collision produced a destructive shockwave that spread out in all directions. In the explosion, the ice blade astral wind collapsed layer by layer. The power of the flaming bow did not decrease. It continued to attack forward and destroyed all the ice blade astral wind in the sky. Sima Ning's expression turned into fear. He never expected that Yixing would have the highest level of astrology, the Sagittarius astrology. He also did not expect that Yixing's strength would be so strong, far surpassing his own. Even his peak's #1 disciple, Wu Qingkong, could not compare. 10,000 Fire Thunder. The power of the flaming bow had not dissipated. Yixing waved the crimson flame bow in his hands. Chapter 798. Yixing looked at him and said, Yixing, how should I address you? Pang Zhan sneered and said, remember, the person who will kill you is the #1 outer disciple of the Radiance Temple, Pang Zhan. Pang Zhan raised his hand, and the saber on his back flew into his hand. It shone brightly, and a terrifying saber aura burst out. The saber aura was domineering and extremely sharp. It contained saber intent. Yixing's aura also burst out, and the arrow intense penetrative power spread in all directions. However, the other party's aura was too powerful. The saber intense aura could cut through everything. Yixing's aura couldn't get close to Pang Zhan at all. Instead, the saber aura made Yixing feel a heavy pressure. This was the first time Yixing had lost to a 3-star king in terms of aura. You're only a 9-star supremacy, but you've comprehended arrow intent. You're indeed not simple. However, you're far from being Sima Ning's match. What other trump cards do you have? Take them all out. Pang Zhan shouted and slashed with his saber. Deadly saber slash. The saber slashed down, and there was no sign of life. This move, Deadly Saber Slash, was filled with killing intent. It was a saber technique that could kill people. Not only was Pang Zhan's saber sharp, but it was also very heavy and contained a terrifying power. This saber contained two kinds of worldly auras, the metal and earth auras. Moreover, these two worldly auras had reached the peak of greater mastery. They were only a little bit away from perfection. Although Pang Zhan's cultivation wasn't the highest among the three-star kings, the strength of his astral energy was the strongest among all the three-star kings Yixing had met. His mastery of high-grade mystic class cultivation techniques surpassed any three-star king that Yixing had met. Even though Pang Zhan hadn't used his astrology yet, the power of his saber wasn't inferior to most four-star kings. Sima Ning's full-strength attack wasn't as terrifying as Pang Zhan's. Yixing sensed that if he only used the fire astrology, he definitely wouldn't be able to block this saber. Whoosh! Starlight shot out from Yixing's forehead and transformed into a huge starlight bow. Yixing was using the Sagittarius constellation. 10,000 flames and thunder. The crimson flame bow appeared in his hand, and he swung out a violent and tyrannical flaming bow shadow. Boom! The flaming bow shadow collided with the astral saber. Shockwaves surged into the sky, and a destructive shockwave spread out in an instant. Pang Zhan didn't move, but the astral saber shattered. Although Sima Ning had died at Yixing's hands and Pang Zhan had expected that Yixing would be able to block his saber strike, he was still shocked to see a ninth-star venerable lord erupt with such heaven-defying strength. Especially when Yixing actually possessed the legendary Sagittarius constellation astrological aspect, which shocked Pang Zhan even more. The other 9 three-star peak kings were no exception. They looked at the Sagittarius constellation in the sky with disbelief in their eyes. Yixing's figure instantly flew backwards. It wasn't because he couldn't withstand the impact, but because he took the initiative to use the force to retreat. Yixing's speed was already extremely fast. With the arrow intent attached to his body, he borrowed the force to retreat and instantly covered 100 miles. At the same time, Yixing pulled back the crimson flame bow, and a black flame arrow gradually formed. Yixing circulated the black flame wind fire art. He had killed Xuezi and Sima Ning in this state before. Although Pang Zhan was stronger, Yixing was forced to use all his strength to kill him. Pang Zhan felt the extreme penetrative power from the black flame arrow, which made him very unhappy. Slash! Pang Zhan shouted loudly, and a ray of starlight shot out from his forehead. As he circulated his astrology, he rushed towards Yixing and slashed out with his saber. Starlight blossomed in the sky, turning into a strange astrological aspect. Most astrological aspects were circular, but Pang Zhan's astrological aspect was long, and its shape was like an ancient large saber. Yixing had only seen 2 types of astrological aspects that weren't circular, his own Sagittarius constellation and Wei Qingxuan's Virgo constellation. The rest, even the black hole astrological aspects were circular. Moreover, even the Sagittarius constellation and Virgo constellation were formed by many small stars, and the small stars were all circular. The ancient saber-like astrological aspect above Pang Zhan was not formed by many small stars, but a complete whole. Therefore, it could be excluded from the constellation astrological aspects. The star power of this astrological aspect was surging and sharp, and its strength far surpassed the extreme grade astrological aspects. Yixing recognized that this was the saint grade astrological aspect, the heavenly saber astrological aspect. Among the weapon-type astrological aspects, only the Sagittarius constellation was the supreme astrological aspect. The other weapon astrological aspects were all saint-grade astrological aspects. For example, the heavenly saber astrological aspect, heavenly saber astrological aspect, heavenly spear astrological aspect, heavenly bow astrological aspect, and so on. Compared to metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, which were all similar astrological aspects, weapon-type astrological aspects were more powerful and lethal. Martial artists who had the heavenly saber astrological aspect were born to be peerless swordsmen. Just like the combination of the Sagittarius constellation and the arrow intent, the combination of the heavenly saber astrological aspect and the saber intent would similarly increase the power. Of course, the heavenly saber astrological aspect and the heavenly bow astrological aspect were of the same grade. Compared to the Sagittarius constellation, it was still a grade lower. If the two of them were of the same cultivation level, Yixing could easily crush his opponent with the Sagittarius constellation astrological aspect. However, the difference in cultivation level between the two of them was huge. Yixing relied on the Sagittarius constellation astrological aspect to increase his strength to a level where he could fight with Pang Zhan. Pang Zhan, on the other hand, used the heavenly saber astrological aspect to increase his strength by a large level. Only a 5-star king could compete with him. Rip Pang Zhan's saber slashed out, and the sky was like a piece of cloth being torn apart. He became one with his saber and traveled through the torn space at extreme speed. His speed was so fast that it was almost like teleportation. The distance between the two of them was more than 200 miles. Even if Pang Zhan's speed was as fast as teleportation, he would still need about a breath's time to reach Yixing. At this moment, the black flame arrow on the crimson flame bow had already formed. Whoosh! The arrow intent left the bow, and all of Yixing's power was contained in this arrow. Extreme penetrative power, extreme speed, and extreme power. This arrow was enough to kill an invincible 4-star king. Even a 5-star king wouldn't dare to underestimate it. However, Pang Zhan's strength wasn't at the level of a normal 5-star king. Facing this arrow, Pang Zhan didn't dodge. His aura was like a rainbow, and his saber aura became brighter and brighter. The space created by the embryonic form of the beam of space was viscous. Under the sharp saber intent, the effect was close to zero. Wherever the saber aura passed, not to mention space, even mountains, and the ground would instantly crack open. There was a terrifying aura that seemed to be able to kill gods and Buddhas in their way. The two's attack speed was extremely fast. In less than half a blink of an eye, the saber aura and the black flame finger aura had collided. Bang! The black flame arrow that had always been successful was instantly split into two. It was actually split in half by Pang Zhan's saber. Now, the saber aura shattered the void, and its power was like a rainbow. It instantly slashed towards Yixing. Chapter 799. Hiss! Yixing sucked in a breath of cold air. Although that sharp blade aura had yet to land on his body, he already felt as if the blade was about to touch him. After becoming a disciple of the Dark Star God Palace, this was the first time Yixing had met such a powerful opponent. Pang Zhan's strength was much stronger than he had imagined. Xuezi was a peak existence amongst the 4-star kings. If it weren't for Yixing, she would have been the #1 outer disciple of the Dark Star God Palace. However, Xuezi's strength was on a completely different level compared to Pang Zhan's. No matter how strong the former was amongst the 4-star kings, she was still a 4-star king, while the latter was a 5-star king. This was a huge difference. Because of this, Yixing could use the Sagittarius constellation to kill Xuezi, but he couldn't do anything to Pang Zhan. Instead, he had instantly fallen into a life-and-death situation. At this critical moment, Yixing's mental energy reached the limit. The super brain activated, and everything seemed to slow down. The crimson flame bow instantly drew out a dark whirlpool. At the same time, Yixing's arrow intent was activated to the limit. He even used the azure cloud wings and the 9 heavens astral travel technique. He used all his strength to increase his speed to the limit. The power of this blade was too terrifying. It could cut through everything. The dark whirlpool couldn't destroy this blade at all. In an instant, the dark whirlpool was split into two by the blade aura. At this moment, Yixing's body and the blade aura flashed at the same time, moving in the same direction at a speed that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. The blade aura moved forward, while Yixing retreated. In the end, the blade aura moved forward for dozens of miles, while Yixing retreated more than 100 miles. The blade aura stopped, and Pang Zhan's figure appeared. He glanced at the tip of the blade, and a few drops of blood dripped down like pearls. It was Yixing's blood. That blade aura had hit Yixing. More than 100 miles away, Yixing suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. There was a thin crack on his inner armor, and blood was flowing out. That slash of Pang Zhan's was indeed too terrifying. Even the high-grade black-rank protective inner armor had a crack cut open. With Yixing's fatality, this wound was nothing. The real injury was that the other party's saber energy had invaded his body and destroyed his internal organs. His opponent's saber energy contained saber intent, which was extremely destructive. Yixing was severely injured, and his face turned pale. He quickly consumed a healing pill. Hee. Pang Zhan was in a good mood. He smiled and said, "A genius who possesses a supreme astrology. This is a heaven-defying monster that only exists in legends. Yixing, you are indeed a peerless genius, but unfortunately, you will die under my blade, ah." As he laughed, Pang Zhan's saber tore through the void, and another terrifying slash came at Yixing. He did not give Yixing any time to catch his breath. Healing pills required a certain amount of time, and Pang Zhan would not give Yixing time to heal. Yixing's super brain scanned and paid attention to Pang Zhan. He was aware of Pang Zhan's every move. The moment Pang Zhan slashed, Yixing had already dodged to the side. At the same time, a beam of starlight shot into the sky, and the surroundings turned into endless darkness. A huge black hole vortex appeared in the sky. Yixing used the black hole astrology. As Yixing's cultivation base grew higher and stronger, the world of darkness formed by the black hole astrological aspect grew wider and wider. In an instant, Pang Zhan fell into darkness. The moment before he fell into darkness, he saw Yixing dodging. He was about to adjust his direction and attack the dodging Yixing. However, the sudden darkness caused him to lose sight of Yixing. Moreover, everyone had an instinctive fear of darkness. If there was nothing in front of them and nothing was known, no one would dare to move forward boldly. Pang Zhan also had this feeling, and his attacks were greatly reduced. What astrology is this? Looking at the only visible black vortex, Pang Zhan was shocked. Although the ultimate astrological form was a legend, every ultimate astrological form had a name. However, Pang Zhan didn't know what kind of astrological form this dark vortex was. While Pang Zhan was shocked, an extremely penetrating aura locked onto him, causing his heart to tighten. He knew that Yixing was aiming at him in the dark, but he did not know where Yixing was. Without knowing Yixing's location, he could not attack randomly. Pang Zhan knew that this would only give the other party an opportunity to find him. Whoosh! Another beam of starlight shot out from between Pang Zhan's brows, forming an earthy yellow astrology in the sky. It was an extreme earth astrology. Pang Zhan had two astrology. One was the saint-level heaven blade astrology, and the other was an extreme earth astrology. The heaven blade astrology focused on offense, while the earth astrology focused on defense. Pang Zhan rarely used his earth astrology, because when facing opponents, he only attacked and rarely defended. Most of his opponents died when he attacked, so he did not need to defend. However, this time, he did not even know where Yixing was, so he could only defend. The earth astrology poured down surging earth astral energy, forming a protective shield in all directions. Pang Zhan also put away his blade and got into a defensive posture, using his blade to protect his body. Pang Zhan had always felt that extremely penetrating aura locking onto him, but Yi Xing did not make a move. He knew that Yi Xing must be using the time to recover from his injuries, so he waited patiently, focusing on defense and staying alert. After a dozen breaths, there was a sudden sonic boom. Pang Zhan's heart tightened, and his eyes shone brightly. He was extremely alert. Almost at the same time as the sonic boom, there was a blood-curdling scream. Pang Zhan was not attacked, but he looked horrified. Yi Xing did not attack him. Instead, he attacked his other 9 teammates. Yi Xing's action was beyond Pang Zhan's expectations, and it was exactly what Pang Zhan did not want to see. That blood-curdling scream was short and mournful. The person who was hit by the arrow had clearly died. Senior brother Pang Zhan. In the darkness, the voices of the other Brilliance Temple disciples were heard, their voices filled with terror. Soon, there was a second scream, and another Brilliance Temple disciple died. Yi Xing. Pang Zhan was furious. Come at me if you have anything. Yi Xing's reply came from the darkness. Don't worry, it will be your turn. I'll take care of these hindrances first. Yi Xing used the grand momentum of darkness. The grand completion of the grand momentum of darkness allowed him to become one with the darkness. In the world of darkness, he moved stealthily without a trace. The sound came from different places. Pang Zhan was unable to determine Yi Xing's location based on the sound. At this moment, Pang Zhan's expression really changed. He was somewhat frightened. He realized that he could not do anything to Yi Xing, but Yi Xing could kill them one by one. Chapter 800. Although Yi Xing had acted quickly, he had only killed 4 people. The Black Hole's world of darkness had a limited range, but the peak 3-star kings were extremely fast. In the beginning, the 9 peak 3-star kings were trapped in the world of darkness. As they did not know what was going on, they did not dare to act rashly. However, after the first scream rang out, the other 3-star peak kings all scattered and fled. They only managed to escape the world of darkness after running several hundred miles away. Their hearts were filled with fear. Yi Xing's archery was too powerful. Even if they faced him head-on, they would not be able to block one arrow. In the world of darkness, they did not even have the chance to resist. Yi Xing did not chase after the 5 who had escaped the world of darkness. His first target was Pang Zhan. In the world of darkness, Yi Xing pulled open the red flame bow. A black flame arrow condensed as he aimed at Pang Zhan. Whoosh! When his power and aura had accumulated to the limit, Yi Xing instantly released the bowstring. The black flame arrow shot out. The black flame arrow was too fast. In an instant, it had traveled more than 100 miles. As soon as it left the bowstring, it had arrived behind Pang Zhan. The protective shield formed by the Earth Star power was instantly penetrated. However, Pang Zhan's strength was comparable to a 5-star king. His reaction speed was extremely fast. The moment the black flame arrow penetrated the Earth Star power shield, Pang Zhan turned around and raised his saber. The black flame arrow was split into 2. With the Sky Blade Star form and saber intent, Pang Zhan's saber was not only powerful, but also extremely sharp. Unless the black flame arrow hit his body before he could block it, it would immediately be cut in half and lose all its strength the moment it came into contact with his saber. After all, the black flame arrow was only an energy arrow and not a true metal arrow. If it was a metal arrow made of a mystic high-grade metal, Pang Zhan would not be able to split it. However, Pang Zhan's strength was enough to split the metal arrow. Pang Zhan's saber split the black flame arrow in 2. His eyes were filled with intense killing intent as he shouted, "Die!" His saber intent shattered the sky as Pang Zhan rushed toward Yi Xing. In an instant, he had traveled dozens of miles. 100 miles was covered in the blink of an eye. It had to be said that Pang Zhan's reaction was extremely fast. Just from that instant of contact with the black flame arrow, he was able to determine Yixing's direction and distance from the arrow. However, the distance between the two of them was more than 100 li. No matter how fast Pang Zhan was, he couldn't be like an arrow, instantly arriving. And Yixing's reaction speed was not slower than Pang Zhan's. By the time Pang Zhan charged over, Yixing had already moved. Pang Zhan's attack missed and he lost sight of Yixing. He could only turn back to defense and wait for Yixing to attack. After a few breaths, Yixing shot another arrow. The result was the same as before. The black flame arrow merely pierced through Pang Zhan's earth astral energy shield before Pang Zhan reacted and cut the black flame arrow in half. Furthermore, Pang Zhan once again made use of the black flame arrow to attack Yixing. This time, Pang Zhan swept his blade horizontally. The blade aura spread out in a fan shape, spanning dozens of li. Although Yixing relied on his speed to dodge and advance, he was still shocked. Fortunately, the direction he changed was not within Pang Zhan's attack range. Otherwise, he would have taken the initiative to collide with the blade aura. Pang Zhan's strength was much higher than Yixing's. Through the two arrows, Yixing judged that the possibility of killing Pang Zhan was very low. Unless Pang Zhan made a mistake, with his reaction speed, he would be able to block Yixing's arrows. Yixing didn't think that Pang Zhan, a 5-star king and a 3-star king, would make a mistake at the critical moment of life and death. Therefore, Yixing gave up on shooting. Yixing walked in the world of darkness, heading towards the Heavenly Bao Palace. The world of darkness moved along with the black hole astral energy. As the distance between the two increased, Pang Zhan finally left the world of darkness. At this moment, the distance between the two was already a few hundred li. Yixing was already standing outside the Heavenly Bao Palace. Yixing could feel a powerful force pulling him closer and closer to the Heavenly Bao Hall. The seal that enveloped the Heavenly Bao Hall did not stop him. When Pang Zhan saw Yixing, he rushed towards Yixing with extreme speed, his eyes filled with intense killing intent. However, Pang Zhan was blocked by the Heavenly Bao Palace's seal. Looking at Yixing who had entered the seal, Pang Zhan couldn't help but be stunned. Then, he roared, "Yixing, remember this. Next time, I, Pang Zhan, will take your dog life." Yixing smiled faintly and said loudly, "You also remember this. Next time, my arrow will pierce through your head." Just as Yixing said that, he felt the surrounding space begin to distort. At this moment, he realized that the attractive force just now had sent him to a small altar. This small altar was densely covered with runes. From the looks of it, it seemed to have the effect of teleportation. In the blink of an eye, the distorted space turned into a spatial whirlpool. Yixing was sucked into the spatial whirlpool and disappeared. When Yixing's feet touched the ground, he realized that he was already in a spacious hall. This hall was dozens of meters tall and about 100 meters in both length and width. In front of Yixing, there was a portrait on the wall. It was a middle-aged man in black with a bow on his back. Below the portrait, there was a bronze coffin. There was nothing else in the entire hall. It seemed very empty. A thought arose in Yixing's mind: this is Luo Tiangong's burial ground. Luo Tiangong is buried in the coffin. Didn't they say that Luo Tiangong's burial ground has his inheritance and that it's a huge treasure? Where's the treasure? Just as Yixing was feeling puzzled, the sound of air slapping against each other suddenly came from above. Yixing looked up and saw a black eagle about half an arm's length flying towards him. Yixing's heart skipped a beat. He had scanned the entire hall and did not see this black eagle. Now that it had appeared above him, could it have appeared out of thin air? The black eagle flew in front of Yixing and only stopped when it was at the same level as Yixing's head. Its eyes were fixed on Yixing. Yixing also looked at the black eagle with a strange expression. Then, he activated his super brain to scan it. The result surprised Yixing. This black eagle was not alive. It was just a ball of nothingness that was similar to energy. After the black eagle glanced at Yixing, it spoke in human language. "Young man, you don't have to be surprised. It's all thanks to me that you're able to come here." Seeing that the black eagle could speak, Yixing immediately asked, "Senior, why did you ask me to come here? Please tell me." A human-like smile appeared on the black eagle's face as it said, "I was ordered by my master to wait for the person with the Sagittarius constellation. I've waited for 20,000 years. Young man, you're finally here. Hee hee." As Yixing had expected, the image in the sky had led him here because of the Sagittarius constellation. Yixing asked, "Senior, is your master Luo Tiangong, Senior Luo?" Chapter 801. After chatting with the Black Eagle, Yixing understood the situation. The Black Eagle was called Eagle Rail, and his master was indeed Luo Tiangong. Eagle Rail was originally a demon god, and a true god-level demon god at that. After he was subdued by Luo Tiangong, he had been guarding the Heavenly Bao Hall for Luo Tiangong. Later on, when Luo Tiangong's time was up, Eagle Rail was worried that he would end up like Luo Tiangong, so he asked Luo Tiangong to help him cultivate the demon clan's art of immortality, to give up his physical body and turn into a demon spirit, becoming an immortal body of energy. Luo Tiangong helped him succeed, and Eagle Rail's reward was that after Luo Tiangong died, he would guard the Heavenly Bao Hall forever, as Luo Tiangong's tomb guardian. Eagle Rail knew everything about Luo Tiangong and the methods he left behind after his death. Luo Tiangong also told him to find a descendant with the Sagittarius constellation. Senior Luo Tiangong also has the Sagittarius constellation. Yixing couldn't help but ask. Eagle Rail replied, "No, Master has the Heavenly Bao constellation." However, Master's life's opportunities all came from the star's secret realm, and the Almighty who left the star's secret realm was a supreme being with the Sagittarius constellation. When Master was young, he obtained many benefits in the star's secret realm because of the Heavenly Bao constellation. However, Master's constellation is still not enough to obtain all the inheritance of that Almighty. Only the Sagittarius constellation can obtain it. Yixing understood and said, "So Senior Luo Tiangong is looking for an inheritor for the Almighty who left the star's secret realm?" Eagle Rail replied, "That's right. Yixing, you are the inheritor, the only lucky person who has the chance to obtain all the treasures in the star's secret realm." Hearing Eagle Rail's words, Yixing's heart thumped, and he was very excited. Yixing was already looking forward to Luo Tiangong's inheritance. Now that he knew that he could obtain the inheritance of a supreme being, his joy was 100 times stronger. Yixing took 2 deep breaths to calm his mind and said, "Senior Eagle Track, how can I obtain the inheritance of that almighty being?" Eagle Track said, "With your current cultivation, you are still miles away. You need to at least become a 9-star king before you have the right to enter the star's secret realm. However, my master's inheritance came from the star's secret realm. Since you have obtained my master's inheritance, you can also be considered to have obtained part of that Almighty's inheritance." Yixing said, "What should I do now?" Ingui waved his hand, and a hexagonal jade box appeared out of nowhere and flew toward Yixing. Eagle Track said, "My master left you 3 gifts. This is the first one." Yixing opened the jade box. Inside was a ball of blood the size of a finger. This ball of blood was bright red with a hint of gold, and it exuded an extremely surging aura. Although it was only the size of a finger, Yixing felt as if he was looking at a vast ocean. This blood definitely had an extraordinary origin. It was 100 times more powerful than the divine dragon blood essence that Yixing had obtained before. Yixing said in surprise, "What blood is this?" Eagle Track said, "This is the blood essence of a true god. It is the essence of a true god's blood. The most powerful part is condensed from the blood in the heart." Hiss, Yixing's heart thumped. True gods were extremely powerful existences. The power contained in the blood of a true god was extremely terrifying, and the blood essence in the heart was the most powerful. The blood essence condensed from the heart's blood essence contained unimaginable power. Although the true god blood essence in front of him was only the size of a finger, it was a priceless treasure that could only be found by chance. Ingui continued, "The blood essence of a true god can only be condensed from the blood of the heart with surging vitality. Condensing the blood essence of a true god is extremely harmful to their vitality, affecting their lifespan by at least 1,000 years. Only a true god can condense the blood from their heart into blood essence, but no true god is willing to sacrifice their vitality to condense the blood essence. Thus, the blood essence of a true god is extremely rare. This ball of blood essence was condensed from the blood of my master's heart. He originally had a lifespan of 3,000 years, but after condensing this ball of blood essence, he only lived for 500 years. Yixing's heart was somewhat heavy. This small ball of blood essence actually contained 2,000 years of Luo Tiangong's lifespan. 2,000 years. The lifespan of a king was only 1,000 years. Only by undergoing nirvana and becoming a quasi-god could one live for 2,000 years. At this moment, Yixing felt that the jade box in his hand was as heavy as 10,000 kilograms. Yixing sighed and said, "I don't know Senior Luo Tiangong. How can I accept such a valuable gift from him?" Ingui said, "My master said that if he hadn't obtained the fortune left behind by that Almighty in the Star's secret realm, his cultivation might have stopped at the 9-star king realm. Even if he had encountered other opportunities later on, becoming a quasi-god in the first nirvana was his limit. However, because of his fortuitous encounter in the Star's secret realm, he became a true god with a lifespan of 30,000 years. Moreover, he was invincible in the flowing light world for 20,000 years. Even the 3 sacred temples had to retreat before him. That Almighty's kindness to him was higher than the heavens and thicker than the earth, and he had no way to repay it. Therefore, spending 2,000 years of his lifespan to find a successor for that Almighty was nothing." Although it was in Ngui's narration, Yixing was still deeply moved when he heard Luo Tiangong's words. He deeply admired Luo Tiangong's character. Yixing said, "That Almighty and Senior Luo Tiangong both used their kindness to benefit the future generations. This he sincerely admires them. Today, I have received Senior Luo Tiangong's kindness. When my cultivation reaches a certain level, I will definitely leave behind an opportunity for the future generations." Ingui revealed a human-like smile and said, "I believe that my master's greatest wish is for you to become a 9-star king as soon as possible and obtain that Almighty's inheritance. Then, you can become a sovereign like that Almighty. My master was invincible among true gods, but he still couldn't take that step to become a sovereign. It was a pity. The reason why he left behind the true god's blood essence for you was to build your foundation and increase your chances of becoming a sovereign in the future." Yixing's eyes shone with unswerving determination. Becoming a sovereign and stepping into the peak of the martial path was also the goal he had always pursued. The true god's blood essence was surging with power. Although a 9-star venerable needed to accumulate a large amount of astral energy to break through to the king realm, Yixing was sure that refining this true god's blood essence would make it easy for him to break through to the king realm. The key was what grade of imperial body this true god's blood essence would help him build after he broke through to the king realm. The biggest difference between venerables and kings was their physique. After breaking through to the king realm, one would be able to build an imperial body and possess a powerful physique. The stronger one's physique, the stronger one's vitality, and the more astral energy one could store. After reaching the star nirvana realm, one would have to undergo life nirvana. Each life nirvana would allow one's physique to soar and their vitality to increase rapidly. Obviously, if one's physique was already very strong before nirvana, then it would naturally be even stronger after nirvana. From this, it could be seen that the strength of an imperial body was the foundation of the martial path's future. It was extremely important. Chapter 802. An imperial body was divided into 4 grades. Low grade, medium grade, high grade, and top grade. The vast majority of kings had low-grade imperial bodies. Only 1 in 100,000 kings had a medium-grade imperial body. Only 1 in 100,000 kings with a medium-grade imperial body had a high-grade imperial body. Only 1 in 100,000 kings with a high-grade imperial body had a top-grade imperial body. And this was just a rough ratio. In fact, the probability was even lower. An imperial body was formed when one broke through to the king realm. When one was an initial stage king, they could use treasures to enhance it, but when one became a mid-stage king, it would be completely fixed and could not be changed. Every 100 years, a void portal would appear in the Heavenly Bow Continent seal, and only mid-stage kings and below could enter. This was obviously not an accident, but something Luo Tiangong had done on purpose. Otherwise, if the cultivator who entered the Heavenly Bow Palace was already a 4-star king, then this true god blood essence would not have any effect on his imperial body. Yixing was already a 9-star king, and the next step was to break through to the astral sea realm. Naturally, he was very concerned about the grade of his imperial body. Yixing thought to himself, the higher the grade of the imperial body, the stronger the vitality. Even a low-grade imperial body can withstand many fatal injuries at the venerable realm. A medium-grade imperial body has no vital points except for the head. A high-grade imperial body can regrow severed limbs, and there are no vital points on the body. Even if the brain is severely damaged, it can still be treated. As for a top-grade imperial body, it is even more heaven-defying. In terms of vitality, it is comparable to a divine body. It is an immortal body, and even if the head is cut off, it will be fine. True God blood essence is condensed from the blood of a true God's heart. High grade, or top grade. A true God blood essence's vitality was too overwhelming. The imperial body formed would definitely be extraordinary. Yixing did not even consider a low-grade or medium-grade imperial body. In fact, Yixing felt that the probability of a high-grade imperial body was not high. It would most likely be a top-grade imperial body. A true god had spent 2,000 years of his life essence, and if he couldn't make a king's imperial body reach the top grade, it would be a bit unreasonable. However, an extreme-grade king body was only a legend. Even an upper-grade king body was rare. The Dark Star Divine Palace was a top 5-star sect, but for hundreds of years, there had been several batches of disciples without a single upper-grade king body. As for the best quality imperial body, it was something that only the temple masters and divine emperors had ever possessed. On the Dark Star continent, true gods were the peak, numbering around 100. Quasi-gods were the backbone, numbering in the tens of thousands. As for kings, they were extremely ordinary existences, numbering in the hundreds of millions. How many kings had there been in the Dark Star continent for tens of thousands of years? This was an unimaginable number. From this, it could be seen how rare a top-grade imperial body was. It wasn't strange to call it a legend. Yixing retracted his gaze from the true god blood essence and asked, "Senior Ngui, shall I refine the true god blood essence here?" Eagle Track said, "That's right. After you refine the true god's blood essence, I'll give your master the second and third gifts." After Eagle Track finished speaking, he flapped his wings and flew away, disappearing without a trace. Yixing sat on the ground with the jade box placed in front of him. After refining this true god blood essence, he would be able to break through to the king realm and build an excellent imperial body. He was a little excited in his heart. After a while, Yixing slowly calmed down. At this time, he began to circulate the profound great high-rank falling star art, the third layer. Under the control of Yixing's astral star, the true God blood essence rose from the jade box and moved above Yixing's head before stopping. The surging energy in the true God blood essence turned into wisps of light that were attracted by the falling star art. They fell down and were absorbed into Yixing's body. The energy in the true God blood essence was different from normal astral energy. It didn't gather in the Dantian star vortex along his meridians. After entering his body, most of it seeped into his body and merged with Yixing's flesh, blood, and bones. Yixing could clearly feel that after absorbing the true God blood essence, not only did the astral energy in his body increase in strength, but his physical body also became stronger. Moreover, most of the energy in the true God blood essence was used to strengthen his physical body. Yixing's astral energy and physical body were improving at an extremely fast speed. However, the true God blood essence above his head didn't shrink at all. It seemed to be the size of a finger, but the energy light that fell from it didn't decrease at all. It could be seen that although the true God blood essence was small, the energy it contained was surging like the sea. Yixing couldn't absorb it all in a short time. Time passed slowly. Yixing closed his eyes, wholeheartedly cultivating and absorbing the true God blood essence as if he was in a meditative state. After an entire day passed, the true God blood essence didn't seem to have changed at all. However, Yixing's physical body had improved by leaps and bounds. His cultivation at the peak of Heavenly Layer 9th stage was becoming increasingly stable. In just one day, Yixing's physical body had risen to a new level. Yixing could clearly feel the vitality in his body surging and his self-healing ability greatly enhanced. Although this was partly due to Yixing's previous accumulations, to have such progress in a single day was enough to prove the miraculous effects of the true God blood essence. This was also because the true God blood essence had divided a lot of energy to consolidate Yixing's cultivation. Otherwise, Yixing's physical body would have strengthened even faster. Although his vitality had risen, it was still inferior to a low-grade king body. With the energy of the true God blood essence, he would need to build a high-grade king body at the very least, or even a top-grade king body. Now, this was only a small step forward. It would take a long time. Yixing sat cross-legged. The finger-sized true God blood essence constantly shined with light. Wisps of pure and surging energy were constantly absorbed into Yixing's body, repeating this process over and over again. The first day, the second day, the third day, time passed day by day. Yixing's physical body grew stronger with each passing day. Every few days, Yixing could feel that his physique would undergo a qualitative change. As for his cultivation, it became increasingly stable at the peak of Heavenly Layer 9th stage, only a single step away from reaching the Star Sea realm. However, this single step was extremely difficult to cross. It was even more difficult than cultivating from the early Heavenly Layer 9th stage to the peak of Heavenly Layer 9th stage. Countless 9th star High Lords had been stuck at the peak of Heavenly Layer 9th stage for their entire lives because their destiny was only a 9-star green destiny. Even after hundreds of years, they still weren't able to break through that single step. As for those 9th star High Lords with the King destiny, they were stuck at this single step for far longer than the time it took to cultivate from the early Heavenly Layer 9th stage to the peak of Heavenly Layer 9th stage. From this, it could be seen that Yixing still needed a massive amount of energy to break through to King Realm. Time continued to pass. Yixing's astral stellar within his body had been strengthened to the limit, but it was still constantly fusing with the star force and accumulating strength. He was getting closer and closer to breaking through to King Realm. Yixing's body, because of the nourishment of the true God blood essence, had undergone earth-shaking changes. His vitality surged, as deep as the sea. Chapter 803. Although the true God essence blood's energy was surging, it wasn't truly endless. As Yixing's absorption time grew longer and longer, the true God essence blood became less and less until it finally reached the end. On the 35th day, the last strand of energy light entered Yixing's body. Above his head, there wasn't a single strand of true God essence blood left. It had all been absorbed by Yixing. This last strand of energy light was like the straw that broke the camel's back. It had completely broken through the barrier between the 9th level of astral reaching realm and star sea realm. At this moment, Yixing felt like his inflated body was suddenly empty. A comfortable feeling instantly spread throughout his body. Even his soul seemed to be trembling. King, this is a star sea realm king. Yixing was overjoyed. Although the energy in his body was surging, his body was like an ocean. He could freely control the surging energy in his body as if it was his arm. Just having a powerful energy in one's body wasn't truly powerful. Being able to freely control this powerful energy and bring out its greatest effect was truly powerful. Right now, Yixing had this feeling of true power. Whoosh! Just as Yixing felt this powerful feeling, a frightening pressure surged from above. Yixing raised his head. High up in the sky, pitch-black clouds were rolling. Lightning snakes wandered within the black clouds, and thunder dragons bobbed up and down. The frightening pressure was transmitted from this black cloud. When a martial artist broke through to the astral reaching realm from the astral reaching realm, they would begin to experience the thunder calamity. From the astral reaching realm to the star sea realm, it was a major realm breakthrough. Naturally, one would have to undergo the baptism of the thunder calamity. Moreover, the king body had to undergo the tempering of the thunder calamity to become a king body. Otherwise, no matter how much energy a 9th star Venerable Lord absorbed, it wouldn't be a king body. This wasn't a difference in quantity, but in quality. The king thunder calamity was the law of heaven and earth. Nothing could stop it. The restrictions of the Heavenly Bao continent and the Heavenly Bao palace couldn't. Yixing had just broken through to the star sea realm when he was immediately separated from the Heavenly Bao palace by the law of heaven and earth, appearing in the dimensional space. Looking at the rolling tribulation clouds in the sky, he couldn't help but be startled. When he went through the thunder calamity, the tribulation clouds only covered an area of a few mu. But now, the tribulation clouds covered an area of 100 li. The thunder dragons in the tribulation clouds were a few li long, while the long ones were dozens of li. The pressure coming from the tribulation clouds was extremely terrifying. Yixing was clear about the strength of a 1-star king. If it were any other 1-star king, they definitely wouldn't be able to withstand the power of the tribulation clouds. His venerable realm lightning tribulation was 1 level more than ordinary people's. His king realm lightning tribulation seemed to be more terrifying than ordinary people's. Rumble, soon, a bolt of tribulation lightning struck down like a huge electric snake. It rushed down from the sky in an instant. How fast lightning s speed. Lightning TT. TT test God says. Ye God, s calamity, SA8, T s head. Yixing was right. His king thunder calamity was indeed much more terrifying than an ordinary person's. The power of the first tribulation lightning was at the level of a 3-star king. After all, there were only a few kings who could challenge those of a higher level. Most of the kings were at the normal level. If an ordinary 1-star king encountered a lightning tribulation with the might of a 3-star king, he would probably be fatally injured or even killed instantly. However, compared to Yixing, the tribulation lightning of an ordinary 3-star king was nothing. When Yixing was a 9-star Venerable Lord, he was already invincible among 3-star kings. When he used all his trump cards, he could even kill a peak 4-star king. Now, Yixing had broken through to the star sea realm and become a king. Although he hadn't built his king body, his strength was much stronger than when he was a 9-star Venerable Lord. A mere 3-star king was nothing in Yixing's eyes. Yixing didn't even use his astrology. Using his body as a bow and his astral energy as an arrow, he pointed a finger at the sky. The astral energy of a king realm cultivator had a qualitative breakthrough compared to an honorable realm cultivator's astral energy. It was more than 10 times stronger. Coupled with the penetrative power of the arrow intent, the destructive power of the astral energy finger had reached a terrifying level. The 1,000-meter-long tribulation lightning was instantly pierced through by the astral energy finger. It shattered and turned into tiny electric currents that scattered in all directions. Many tiny electric currents fell on Yixing's body, but they were directly absorbed by Yixing's body. When a venerable broke through to the king realm, his body would absorb the power of thunder and lightning during the king thunder calamity. Only then would he be able to build his king body. Yixing's flesh and blood had absorbed the energy of a true god's blood essence. In order to refine his king body, he needed far too much power of thunder and lightning. The power of thunder and lightning he absorbed just now wasn't even 1/10 of the required amount. Naturally, it was like a clay ox flowing into the sea, absorbed by Yixing's flesh and blood without causing any fluctuations. It didn't take long for the lightning energy in his body to completely merge with his flesh and blood. Yixing could sense that his flesh, blood, tendons, and bones had changed. Hong long, not long after, another earth-shaking thunderclap rang out. The second wave of tribulation lightning descended from the sky, instantly striking down. Compared to the first tribulation lightning, this tribulation lightning was more than twice as thick. Its power was also several times stronger. It wasn't inferior to a peak 3-star king's all-out attack. The first tribulation lightning was only at the level of an ordinary 3-star king. The second tribulation lightning was at the level of a peak 3-star king. However, Yixing still ignored the might of a peak 3-star king. Yixing still didn't use his astrology. He only took out his high-grade Xian Bao, Flame Bao, and used Myriad Flames Thunder. The Flame Bao's shadow shot towards the sky. The second tribulation lightning was instantly dispersed by the Flame Bao's shadow. It turned into a rain of lightning and fell. Yixing absorbed a lot of it into his body, continuing to refine his body. Hong long, the third tribulation lightning struck, and the sound was even louder. If the second tribulation lightning was only bigger than the first, it was still a lightning snake. The third tribulation lightning had a qualitative change. A right horn grew on the lightning snake, turning it into a lightning dragon. In terms of power, the third tribulation lightning had a qualitative change compared to the second tribulation lightning. It had already reached the level of a 4-star king. Yixing sensed it and immediately used his flame astrology. At this moment, the tribulation clouds were in the sky. The flame astrology was an extreme flame astrology, but it couldn't compete with the tribulation clouds. It was pushed to the corner of the sky. Although it was pushed aside, the power of the flame astrology didn't change. Yixing's strength increased greatly. Myriad Flames Thunder. Yixing used the same move. He waved his scarlet flame bow, and the flame bow's shadow instantly shattered the void. Even the third tribulation lightning was dispersed. Chapter 804. A large amount of fine lightning bolts fell from the sky and were absorbed by Yixing. The lightning power contained in the third wave of tribulation lightning was of a much higher quality than the previous 2 waves. Absorbing it into his body had a much better effect on tempering his fleshly body. After easily passing the third wave of tribulation lightning, Yixing's expression didn't show any joy. Instead, it was somewhat serious. According to convention, the tribulation lightning for venerables was 4 waves, the tribulation for kings was 6 waves, and the tribulation for quasi-gods was 9 waves. However, Yixing's lightning tribulation was different from ordinary lightning tribulations. It was a 5-fold tribulation, one more than an ordinary lightning tribulation. Now, Yixing's tribulation for kings had a very high starting point. Its power was equivalent to that of a 3-star king. Just the third wave of tribulation lightning was already at the level of a 4-star king. If the rest of the tribulation lightning followed this pattern, the fourth wave of tribulation lightning would have the power of a peak 4-star king. The fifth wave would have the power of a peak 5-star king. The sixth wave would have the power of a peak 5-star king. Peak 5-star king was much stronger than Pang Zhan. Even Yixing felt a lot of pressure when breaking through to king. Furthermore, what made Yixing feel even more pressured was whether his tribulation of the king realm would be the same as the tribulation of the martial highness realm. If it was, then he would have to face the seventh wave of tribulation lightning. The seventh wave of tribulation lightning was truly terrifying. If it was one level higher than the sixth wave, wouldn't it be at the level of a 6-star king? This was what Yixing was most worried about. Rumble. Before Yixing could think any further, the sound of thunder came from the sky. The fourth wave of tribulation lightning had already struck down. As Yixing had expected, the fourth wave of tribulation lightning was already at the level of a peak 4-star king. This was a special tribulation lightning that targeted him. If an ordinary martial artist encountered such a lightning tribulation while breaking through to king, only death would await them. The greater the pressure, the more it aroused Yixing's desire to resist. Facing the tribulation lightning in the sky, Yixing seemed to have a ball of fire burning in his heart. Kill! Yixing roared as he circulated his astral energy to the limit. Darkness, wind, and fire, the three grand daos of heaven and earth circulated as he leaped into the sky, facing the tribulation lightning. Yixing's speed wasn't slow, but the speed at which the lightning struck was countless times faster than his. When Yixing was less than 100 meters above the ground, he collided with the fourth tribulation lightning. Yixing's flaming bow shadow exploded the nearly 10-mile-long tribulation thunder. Yixing was also struck to the ground by the terrifying power contained in the tribulation thunder. Fortunately, this was a dimensional space. Otherwise, the impact of Yixing's landing would have caused a large area to collapse. This time, the tribulation lightning did not scatter very thin. The electric current paths formed were as thick as a finger. The short ones were a few meters, while the long ones were more than 10 meters. When these electric currents fell on Yixing's body, they were also absorbed by his flesh and blood. However, when the electric currents entered his body, Yixing felt as if he was being electrocuted. The power of thunder contained life, but it also contained destruction. Although Yixing's physique was powerful, the electric energy absorbed by his body was too strong. He still felt pain, which meant that his body was injured. If the fourth tribulation lightning was already like this, then it could be foreseen that the next few tribulation lightning would be even more difficult to bear. The pain quickly disappeared. Although Yixing had yet to establish an imperial body, his body had absorbed the energy of a true divinity's blood essence. His life force was surging, and even a small injury was automatically healed in a breath of time. The stronger the power of thunder, although it would cause damage to the body, it also meant that the effect of tempering his flesh and bones would be better. Yixing could feel that the strengthening of his physique had significantly increased. Rumble, the fifth tribulation lightning struck down. Resplendent electric light instantly illuminated the entire dimensional void. A thunder dragon that was as thick as a bucket and dozens of miles long rushed out from the tribulation clouds, instantly smashing down. The first and second tribulation lightning was a thunder snake. The third and fourth tribulation lightning was a thunder flood dragon. The fifth tribulation lightning had evolved into a thunder dragon, and its power had risen to another level. As Yixing expected, the fifth tribulation lightning's power had reached the level of a 5-star king. Whoosh! A beam of starlight shot out from between Yixing's eyebrows. Yixing instantly used the Sagittarius constellation astrological avatar, his strength erupting to the max. The black hole astrological avatar was unable to enhance Yixing's combat strength, it only had a supporting role. When he fought with other martial artists, it was very effective. But facing the attack of the thunder tribulation, it was useless. The black hole astrological avatar formed a dark world that simply couldn't affect the thunder tribulation. This was because the attacks of the thunder tribulation were formed by the rules of the world. Towards Yixing, it wasn't something that could be seen with the naked eye. Rather, it was a lock on the level of the Tao. There was simply no way to avoid it. He could only rely on his formidable strength to directly resist it. The Sagittarius constellation astrological avatar was truly worthy of being called the highest astrological avatar. As the power of the stars fell down, Yixing's power rose. In the blink of an eye, the crimson flame bow shot out an arrow. Just as the arrow left the bow, it collided with the thunder dragon that was falling from the skies. Bang! With a loud explosion, the arrow pierced through the thunder dragon like starlight. After passing through the thunder dragon, it shot another 10 miles into the sky before its power was exhausted and it vanished without a trace. The thunder dragon that contained the wild power of thunder was pierced through by the arrow. It exploded inch by inch, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into arcs of electricity that drifted down like a rain of lightning. Many of these arcs of lightning fell onto Yixing's body. They were absorbed by his flesh and blood, causing him to feel an intense stabbing pain. The power of these arcs of lightning was much more destructive to his body than the fourth stage of tribulation lightning. After a full 5 breaths of time, the stabbing pain finally disappeared. The surging life force in his flesh and blood healed the damage. This was only the 5th stage of tribulation lightning. There was still the even stronger 6th stage, and the even more terrifying 7th stage. Yixing's expression was solemn and firm. He looked at the tribulation clouds in the sky with vigilance. The attacks of the tribulation lightning would become stronger and faster as it went on. It was already difficult to judge the attacks of the tribulation lightning just by the sound. One had to look at it with their eyes to be able to react immediately. Not long after, the 6th stage of tribulation lightning descended. Another 10-mile-long thunder dragon rushed out from the tribulation clouds. Now, the lightning instantly lit up the entire sky. This thunder dragon was even stronger than the 5th stage of tribulation lightning. Its power was even more terrifying, reaching the level of a peak 5-star king. Yixing was already prepared. The moment the thunder dragon appeared, he had already locked onto it. He had already pulled back the crimson flame bow, and a black flame arrow shot out. This was Yixing's most powerful arrow. The black flame arrow instantly soared into the sky and collided with the thunder dragon. Bang! The two forces collided and instantly exploded. Resplendent electric light bloomed and shot out in all directions. The power of this arrow was too terrifying. More than half of the thunder dragon was instantly blown apart. However, the 6th stage of tribulation lightning was also extremely powerful. Before the black flame arrow could completely penetrate it, its power was exhausted. The thunder dragon that was still several miles long continued to fall. Chapter 805. If this lightning dragon was a true living being, then even if it had an immortal body, it would have lost its ability to fight after half of its body was blown apart. Unfortunately, this lightning dragon was only condensed from the power of lightning. It wasn't alive. Even if it was blown into strands of electricity, it still contained the power of lightning. It was just that the power was scattered. The lightning dragon's lower half wasn't destroyed by the arrow. Its power was still as one, and its attack power was still terrifying. It was only a small part of the lightning dragon's body, but the power it contained was not inferior to the 5th stage of the lightning tribulation. Fortunately, Yixing didn't stop after shooting the arrow. Instead, he had a backup plan. With a slash of the crimson flame bow, he immediately drew out a huge black vortex. The lightning dragon's lower half instantly charged into the black vortex. The lightning as thick as a water bucket was cut into pieces by the sharp power of the black vortex. The black vortex also started to collapse due to the power of the lightning. In the end, the black vortex exploded with a boom. About 90% of the lightning dragon's body had been cut into pieces by the black vortex. However, the remaining 10%, which was still hundreds of meters long, blasted onto Yixing's body. Even though the several hundred meters of lightning was only 1/10 of the lightning dragon's size and 1/30th of the entire lightning dragon's size, it was still a colossus for Yixing's body. In an instant, Yixing's figure disappeared. Only the resplendent electric current covered the entire ground, covering hundreds of meters. After a breath's time, the dazzling white electric light disappeared. All the electric current dissipated into the void. Only Yixing's body was left on the ground. The crimson flame bow had already fallen to the side. Yixing was already on the ground. Electric light swam all over his body, and his body was twitching. At this moment, Yixing finally understood what pain was. Every inch of his body, every inch of his flesh, every inch of his tendons and bones felt like they were being torn apart. The pain caused his mind to go blank, and his mental power felt like it was being pierced by needles. After 10 breaths, the electric light swam around Yixing's body disappeared. Although the pain in his body wasn't light, it was much better. He finally regained control of his body. Yixing spat out a big mouthful of blood. The blood he spat out was black and had a burnt smell. After spitting out the blood, Yixing felt his body relax a lot, and the pain was quickly alleviating. Although the pain he had just endured was intense, the benefits he obtained were equally rich. His entire body had been tempered by the power of thunder. Yixing's physique had almost become 10 times stronger. The injuries in his body were recovering at an extremely fast speed. It could be seen that his vitality was surging. In less than 10 breaths of time, Yixing's sense of pain had completely disappeared. Instead, he felt that his body was filled with comfort and strength. Judging from the pain he felt a moment ago, Yixing's injuries were definitely not light. Yet, he was able to recover so quickly. His healing ability was even faster than a mid-grade imperial body, almost at the level of a high-grade imperial body. Yixing, to the sky. He saw that the tribulation clouds in the sky had not dissipated. Instead, they were gathering more and more intensely. More and more thunder condensed in the rolling black clouds, as if they were brewing the next wave of terrifying attacks. Yixing's heart skipped a beat. It seemed that he was about to face the attack of the 7th level of thunder tribulation. Regarding the 7th level of thunder tribulation, Yixing was both looking forward to it and also a little afraid. The 6th level of thunder tribulation had an obvious effect on strengthening his flesh and blood. Now that he had reached the level of a high-grade imperial body, the 7th level of thunder tribulation was even more terrifying than the 6th. If he successfully crossed it, Yixing was sure that he would be able to build a legendary top-grade imperial body. Therefore, Yixing was looking forward to it. However, Yixing had already experienced the power of the 6th level of thunder tribulation. It had struck him so hard that smoke was coming out of his 7 orifices. The power of the 7th level of thunder tribulation, according to Yixing's estimation, would reach the level of a 6-star king. Yixing was worried about whether he could withstand it. If he couldn't survive and was directly struck to death by the tribulation thunder, everything would be over. Therefore, he was also a little afraid. Yixing took a deep breath and stabilized his mind. Whether he was looking forward to it or afraid of it, the 7th level of thunder tribulation was about to arrive. The only thing he could do now was to abandon all thoughts and prepare himself with all his heart and soul, so that he could face the attack of the 7th level of thunder tribulation in his best state. If he died, there would be nothing left. Only by living would he have a future and be able to think about other things. Therefore, in order to survive, Yixing had to abandon all other thoughts and focus on dealing with the upcoming terrifying attack. Above, the tribulation clouds surged, becoming more and more intense. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning struck down from the tribulation clouds. The 7th level of thunder tribulation had arrived. Yixing saw that this bolt of lightning was not a thunder snake, nor was it a thunder flood dragon, but a thunder arrow that was dozens of miles long. As this thunder arrow shot out from the tribulation clouds, one could vaguely see the endless power of thunder condensing into a bow of thunder. Yixing was an archery martial artist. His strongest astrological sign was the Sagittarius constellation. This level of thunder tribulation was clearly aimed at Yixing. That thunder arrow was incomparably resplendent and contained an extremely violent power. With extreme speed, it flashed down. If Yixing's mind was not stable, facing the 7th level of thunder tribulation, he would definitely be shocked and unable to react in time. However, at this moment, Yixing was fully focused on dealing with this attack. Any changes that occurred in the 7th level of thunder tribulation did not affect his mind at all. The moment the thunder arrow appeared, Yixing also shot out the black flame arrow that he had long prepared. Then, the power of the astral stars, astrological signs, and the momentum of heaven and earth were all pushed to the limit. The crimson flame bow drew a huge dark vortex in the sky. This was already his limit. Previously, he had not been able to block the 6th level of thunder tribulation. Now, he naturally could not block the 7th level of thunder tribulation. However, this was all he could do. The rest would depend on his body to withstand this terrifying attack, persevere, and survive. Although the black flame arrow that Yixing shot out was terrifying, it was clearly not on the same level as the thunder arrow. When the two arrows collided, the black flame arrow instantly turned to ashes, but the thunder arrow only lost less than 30% of its power. The thunder arrow continued to shoot down. The dark vortex also exploded in an instant, but it only dissipated about 10% of the thunder arrow. The thunder arrow still carried about 60% of its power. It shot into Yixing's body. Resplendent lightning exploded, instantly submerging the ground for hundreds of meters. After a breath, the lightning disappeared. Yixing's body was revealed. He was still in a standing position. But in the next moment, his body fell to the sides. He was actually split in two by the thunder arrow. This time, what Yixing felt was not only severe pain in his body, but also the pain of his soul being torn apart, as well as the great horror of death. Yixing's consciousness went blank as he fell into the dark abyss. However, his flesh and blood were squirming. One side of his body was drying up and blood was flowing out, while the other side of his body was surging with vitality. Blood gathered, and flesh and blood were reborn. In just a dozen breaths, the dry half of his body turned into a mummy, while the other half of his body grew new flesh and blood. Yixing's consciousness broke free from the dark abyss and returned to his body. Immortal body, best-grade imperial body, I survived and built a best-grade imperial body. The moment his consciousness recovered, Yixing was overjoyed. Chapter 809. When Gu Ming mentioned Shuizi, the others felt the same way. Zhang Yuanshan said, "Unfortunately, we don't know where senior brother Shui is now." Hu Yanlong said, "Senior brother Shui is no longer here." Hu Yanlong's words were like a clap of thunder, shocking everyone. Yixing was also shocked. When Yixing killed Shuizi, there was no one nearby. He thought that no one would know about it. He didn't expect Hu Yanlong to know that Shuizi was dead. Yixing immediately calmed down. Hu Yanlong might know that Shuizi was no longer here, or he might have other ways to sense it. He might not know that Yixing was the one who killed Shuizi. Gu Ming admired Shuizi very much. When he heard Hu Yanlong's words, he immediately became excited. Gu Ming said, "You're talking nonsense. Senior brother Shui is strong. It's not an exaggeration to say that he's the strongest in the outer sect. How can he be no longer here?" Zhang Yuanshan and the others nodded, agreeing with Gu Ming's words. They still thought that Shuizi could deal with Pang Zhan. In their hearts, Pang Zhan couldn't kill Shuizi. Naturally, they didn't believe that Shuizi was dead. Hu Yanlong said, "Senior brother Shui is indeed no longer here. I saw it with my own eyes. The disciple of the 10th peak, Yi Xing, killed him." Gu Ming exclaimed, "How is that possible?" Zhang Yuanshan didn't believe it either. He laughed, "The disciple of the 10th peak, Yi Xing. The 9th star venerable lord from a mid-level continent. Ha! He might be able to show off in the 10th peak where trash gather. However, how can he kill senior brother Shui? The two of them, one is the sky and the other is the earth. There's a world of difference." Yi Xing was also surprised. He didn't expect Hu Yanlong to see him killing Shuizi. Didn't that mean that Hu Yanlong saw him possessing the Sagittarius constellation? Yi Xing suddenly had a murderous intent. He was not particularly concerned about the fact that he had killed Shuizi being exposed. After leaving the Heavenly Bow continent, he did not intend to return to the Dark Star continent. Instead, he intended to return to the Star continent. When he returned to the Dark Star continent in the future, he would already have the strength of a quasi-god. With his aptitude, he should be able to gain the appreciation of the upper echelons of the deity's Templar. Moreover, the reason why he killed Shuizi was because Shuizi wanted to kill him. At that time, the deity's Templar would not give up on a genius because of this. However, his possession of the Sagittarius constellation astrology was a secret in the Dark Star Divine Palace. Other than Feng Xiaoxiao, no one else knew about it. His intuition told him that it would not be a good thing to expose his supreme astrology. Towards the killing intent towards Hu Yanlong, the majority of it originated from the fact that she knew the secret of him possessing the Sagittarius constellation. Unfortunately, the distance between him and Hu Yanlong was countless tens of thousands of miles. Even if he wanted to kill him, there was nothing he could do. Hu Yanlong was not surprised by the reactions of Gu Ming, Zhang Yuanshan, and the others. Hu Yanlong said, "If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it either." As she spoke, Hu Yanlong opened her martial path heavenly eye. Her martial path heavenly eye was different from others. Whether it was her eyeballs or other parts of her eyes, they were all pitch black. Clearly, she had cultivated an eye technique. Hu Yanlong continued, "My dark eye can see up to a distance of 10,000 miles. That day, I knew that senior brother Shui was going to find Yi Xing, so I used my eye technique to observe from afar. I didn't expect that Yi Xing had concealed himself so deeply. He had an extremely powerful trump card that allowed him to kill senior brother Shui." Hu Yanlong did not reveal that Yi Xing possessed the Sagittarius constellation astrology. She only said that Yi Xing had an extremely powerful trump card. However, Yi Xing knew that since Hu Yanlong had seen it with her own eyes, it was impossible for her not to recognize the Sagittarius constellation astrology. The more she did not reveal it to others, the more certain Yi Xing was that the exposure of his Sagittarius constellation astrology was definitely not a small matter. Seeing Hu Yanlong use her eye technique, Yi Xing understood in his heart that when he was fighting Shuizi, he had felt someone watching him. So it was Hu Yanlong. However, something had happened in the sky at that time, diverting Yi Xing's attention. It made Yi Xing think that the feeling of being watched came from the change in the sky. Therefore, Yi Xing did not investigate further. Although Gu Ming, Zhang Yuanshan, and the others still found it hard to believe that Yi Xing could kill Shuizi, they still somewhat believed it when they saw Hu Yanlong's eye technique. Gu Ming still had doubts in his heart. He said, "Yi Xing is only a 9th star venerable lord. How could he be so powerful that he could kill senior brother Shui? Furthermore, The first peak search area is in the southern region, while the third peak search area is in the eastern region. The two places are very far apart. Why would senior brother Shui run to the eastern region to find Yixing? Hu Yanlong smiled coldly and said, they had some conflict at Enlightenment Peak. Furthermore, why would senior brother Shui need to explain to you why he was looking for Yixing? Hearing Hu Yanlong's words, everyone understood in their hearts. So, Shui went to find trouble with Yixing. He even wanted to take Yixing's life. However, he was killed by Yixing in the end. Seeing the change in everyone's expression, Hu Yanlong said, no matter what, Yixing killed senior brother Shui. When we leave the Heavenly Bao continent, I will definitely report this to the Shui clan's old ancestor and reveal all his secrets. He will die without a burial place. In the Heavenly Bao palace, Yixing's expression turned cold. The killing intent in his heart grew even stronger. Pucci, Eagle Rail appeared and flew in front of Yixing. He said, not bad, not bad. You only used 8 days to cultivate the Divine Eye technique. It's faster than I expected. Hearing Eagle Rail's voice, Yixing retracted his gaze. Closing his Divine Eye technique, he opened his eyes. Yixing said, it was all thanks to Senior Luo Tiangong's blood essence that I was able to cultivate it. Eagle Rail said, since you have cultivated the Divine Eye technique, I can give you the third gift. As he said that, Eagle Rail flapped his wings, and 3 silver arrows appeared in front of Yixing. Yixing said, 3 arrows? What are their effects? Ever since he could condense astral arrows, Yixing had not used metal arrows. Firstly, metal arrows were troublesome to make, and their lifespan was not long. Although their power was stronger than astral arrows, there was no qualitative difference. In terms of convenience, they were far from astral arrows. As such, metal arrows were naturally eliminated. However, if there were metal arrows of black grade and above, then it would definitely have a special effect. If it were just ordinary metal arrows, there was no need to forge them. Eagle Track said, these 3 arrows are just ordinary dark-level metal arrows, but my master has infused them with the power of his void-shattering archery, which allows them to travel through the void. With the help of the void-shattering God Eye, the arrows will be able to shoot wherever the eyes lock onto. Yixing's eyes widened. He said, wherever the Divine Eye technique's gaze is locked on, the arrows can be shot there. This is too heaven-defying. Moreover, archery can be cultivated to the void-shattering realm. According to Yixing's knowledge, the realms of archery were transformation, following the heart, binding space, and soul lock. He was currently at the embryonic form of binding space, and soul lock could only be achieved by archers of the quasi-god level. Once an arrow was shot, it would lock on to the soul. Even if a quasi-god had an immortal body, he would be killed by an arrow of soul lock. As for the realms above soul lock, Yixing was not sure. Chapter 8:10. Ingui said, there are 6 realms in archery: transformation, following the heart, binding space, soul locking, void shattering, and realm crossing. However, the 6th realm, realm crossing, is only a legend. It is said that when one reaches the realm crossing, the arrow can penetrate the realm barrier and shoot out beyond a realm. Once the arrow is shot out, it can cross a realm and kill a soul. I'm afraid that only the legendary supreme being of the Tao of archery would have such means. As far as I know, even the most powerful true god of archery could only reach the shattering void tier. My master is invincible among true gods, but he has only reached the peak of the void-shattering realm. Once he shoots an arrow, it can penetrate multiple spaces. Within a realm, no one can block it. However, no matter how strong an arrow of the void-shattering realm is, it can only sweep across a realm. It cannot penetrate the realm barrier. Yixing looked at the 3 silver arrows in front of him and said, these 3 arrows can also penetrate multiple spaces. Yixing thought to himself, if these 3 arrows could penetrate multiple spaces, wouldn't they be able to shoot to the star continent? Ingui shook his head and said, if my master used it, it would be easy for him to go through multiple spaces, but you can't. That arrow only contains a little bit of my master's void-shattering power. Without my master's archery power, it can only travel through one space. Plus, even if that power could go through space, your void-shattering godly eyes has not reached the 2nd level. You can't see the other space, and your arrow will not be able to reach there. Yixing nodded. The void-piercing arrow wasn't shot out aimlessly. Instead, the void-piercing arrow's target would be where the void-piercing arrow was aimed at. If one couldn't even see the target with their eyes, then naturally, the arrow wouldn't be able to reach it. Yixing suddenly had an idea. A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and he said, the arrow can penetrate through the void within the same space. In other words, it can reach any corner of the Heavenly Bow continent. Let me try. As soon as he finished speaking, Yixing took out the crimson flame bow and knocked the void-shattering arrow. Yixing used the god's void-shattering eye, and his gaze penetrated forward. Soon, he found Huyanlong, Gu Ming, and the others. Yixing's gaze locked onto Huyanlong. The void-piercing arrow also shone brightly and locked onto Huyanlong, who was talking to Gu Ming, Zhang Yuanshan, and the others to testify that Yixing had killed Shuizi, suddenly had a change in expression. As a genius amongst the peak 3-star kings, Huyanlong's reaction was extremely quick. The moment the void-piercing arrow locked onto her, she felt a piercing aura, and a sense of crisis arose in her heart. Huyanlong immediately revolved his astral defense. At the same time, he took out a high-grade Xian weapon and vigilantly surveyed his surroundings. Huyanlong immediately circulated his dark gloomy eye. Soon, he determined the direction of the danger and searched carefully. However, to her disappointment, she didn't find anything even after carefully searching for several 100 kilometers ahead. However, that penetrating aura had always been there, and she could always faintly sense it. What was going on? Huyanlong could not understand. In the Heavenly Bow continent, only 4-star kings and below were allowed to enter. Even if someone wanted to stab someone in the back, shouldn't there be some distance between them? How far could a low-level king shoot? In order to make it difficult for the opponent to dodge, the distance had to be within 100 kilometers. However, if one were to shoot an arrow from the back, 200 kilometers would be the limit. If the distance was too far, the arrow would stay in the air for too long, and the target would have enough time to dodge. However, Huyanlong had observed more than 400 kilometers. Not to mention the lethality, just the range alone was difficult for low-level kings to reach. Being able to shoot out 300 kilometers was already the limit. Huyanlong saw that there was nothing within 400 kilometers, and naturally found it strange. She could only use her dark gloomy eye to continue searching further. Huyanlong was the only one who had sensed that penetrating aura. The other 4 were not locked onto by the void-piercing arrow, and their lives were not in danger. Naturally, they didn't sense anything. Seeing Huyanlong suddenly acting as if she was facing a great enemy, they were all surprised and also raised their guard. Huyanlong was getting more and more surprised. She had searched more than 1,000 kilometers in the direction of the danger, but she didn't find anything. Her dark gloomy eye could see more than 100,000 kilometers. Searching 1,000 kilometers only took a breath's time. With the eyesight of her dark gloomy eye, if someone shot an arrow from the back and the other party could see her, she would definitely be able to see the other party. Could it be that I sensed wrongly? Huyanlong thought to herself. If someone were to say that someone was ambushing her from more than 1,000 kilometers away, she wouldn't believe it. Even a high-level king couldn't shoot an arrow from 1,000 kilometers away. Only a quasi-god archer expert could do that. Hu Yanlong repeatedly searched the area within 1,000 kilometers several times. She even gave a cursory glance beyond 1,000 kilometers, but she still found nothing. Finally, she relaxed her mind. In her opinion, she was being overly suspicious. Just as Hu Yanlong relaxed her mind, the void in front of her suddenly rippled like a stone thrown into a calm water surface. With a certain point as the center, ripples spread out in all directions. A silver arrow pierced through that point and shot toward Hu Yanlong. Hu Yanlong was still maintaining her dark gloomy eye. Her eyesight was extremely strong, and she could see the arrow very clearly. However, she didn't have time to dodge. The arrow appeared less than 100 meters away from her. It had suddenly shot out from the void, and she simply couldn't react in time. Under the gaze of her dark gloomy eye, the arrow drew a clear trajectory in the void and became larger and larger. Ah! Hu Yanlong suddenly let out a miserable scream. Before she could close her dark gloomy eye, the silver arrow pierced through her protective astral shield and shot into her dark gloomy eye. The silver arrow's penetrating power was extremely terrifying. In an instant, it shot through the dark gloomy eye and out the back of Hu Yanlong's head, forming a thumb-sized bloody hole. Hu Yanlong's miserable scream was short and shrill. At the same time, the silver arrow brought out an arrow of blood, and her body fell backward. The power contained in the arrow instantly destroyed the vitality in her head. Although she had built a mid-grade imperial body and had strong vitality, she would die instantly if her brain was destroyed. Even if she had a high-grade imperial body, the damage to her brain was very serious. The vitality of a mid-grade imperial body couldn't save her at all. After the silver arrow pierced through Hu Yanlong's head, it shot forward for more than 100 kilometers, piercing through countless trees and finally shooting into a mountain peak. Senior Sister Huyan, Gu Ming, Zhang Yuanshan, and the others were all horrified. They never thought that an arrow would suddenly shoot out from the void and take Hu Yanlong's life. In the first moment, they had already fallen to the ground, afraid that another arrow would shoot out from the void. Yixing retracted his gaze and closed his void-breaking god eye. Hu Yanlong was dead, and she would only take his secret to the Yellow Springs Road. Chapter 8:12. Outer Palace. The sound of the door opening rang in the ears of every martial artist. The gazes of all the cultivators turned to look at that big door in unison. This was a very large stone door. It was 30 feet tall and 20 feet wide. Previously, the disciples of the Radiance Temple and the Star River Temple had tried to open the stone door, but none of them succeeded. This was a stone door that could only be opened from the inside. The Heavenly Bow Hall was originally buried deep underground, and had only recently appeared on the surface. Then, these martial artists came to the Heavenly Bow Hall, broke the restriction outside the hall, and came to the outer palace. At this moment, a stone door that led to the inner palace was suddenly pushed open. All the martial artists were shocked, and a chill ran down their spines. Only Pang Zhan reacted after a shock. He remembered that Yixing had disappeared outside the Heavenly Bow Hole. At that time, Pang Zhan thought that Yixing had entered the Heavenly Bow Hole. However, when Pang Zhan entered the Heavenly Bow Hall, he did not see Yixing's figure. At this moment, the stone door leading to the inner palace was suddenly opened. If nothing strange had happened, the only person Pang Zhan could think of was Yixing. The stone door was not completely pushed open. When it was wide enough for one person to pass through, Yixing walked out from inside. It was indeed Yixing. Pang Zhan's pupils shrank. His gaze locked onto Yixing, and the killing intent in his heart exploded instantly. Yixing's killing intent towards Pang Zhan was very strong, and he wanted to kill him. Pang Zhan was the same. He wanted to kill Yixing outside the Heavenly Bow Hall, but he failed. Instead, he lost the lives of 3 of his junior brothers. His killing intent towards Yixing was very strong. Later, the disciples of the Radiance Temple had attacked the disciples of the Dark Star Temple. Because of this, Pang Zhan could not find Yixing, and could only vent his anger on the other disciples of the Dark Star Temple. Yixing's appearance elicited different reactions from the crowd. The disciples of the Star River Divine Palace and the majority of the Radiance Divine Palace's disciples didn't recognize Yixing. They looked at Yixing in shock. Pang Zhan, Wukong Qing, and the other disciples of the Brilliance Divine Hall who knew Yixing looked solemn and murderous. When the disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace saw Yixing, they were delighted at first, but their hearts soon cooled down. They did not think that Yixing could save them. Even the disciples of the 10th Summit were no exception. That was because Pang Zhan was too powerful. Zhuo Fifan, the number 1 disciple of the 7th Summit, was so powerful that he was almost invincible among the 4-star kings. However, he was still severely injured after taking only 1 strike from Pang Zhan. Yixing. Pang Zhan stared at Yixing and was the first to speak. I knew that you must be in the Heavenly Bao Palace. You really showed up. Let's see where you can run to in the Heavenly Bao Palace. Yixing had broken through to the King Realm and built an extreme-grade Imperial body. The extreme-grade Imperial body had returned to its original state and concealed Yixing's King Realm aura. None of the martial artists present could tell that Yixing was already a King Realm expert. Of course, those who did not know that Yixing was a 9th-star Venerable Lord could not tell what cultivation level Yixing was at. However, those who knew that Yixing was a 9th-star Venerable Lord assumed that Yixing was still a 9th-star Venerable Lord. Previously, in the battle between Pang Zhan and Yixing, Yixing had used the Black Hole Astrology and the Sagittarius Astrology. Even after using all his trump cards, he still could not defeat Pang Zhan. There was a huge gap between their strength. Moreover, Pang Zhan thought that the reason why he could not kill Yixing was that Yixing's astrology was too strange. Secondly, Yixing had enough space. Now, although the Heavenly Bao Palace was big, it was only a few hundred feet in radius. For Pang Zhan's strength, a few hundred feet was no different from being in a square meter. Even if Yixing used the Black Hole Astrology to create a dark world, Pang Zhan was confident that he could kill Yixing. Yixing glanced at Gao Jian, Zhuo Fifan, and the others who were lying on the ground. Flames of anger burned in his eyes. Yixing said, "Run. I came to kill you. Why should I run?" As he spoke, Yixing's aura burst out. The surging power was like an invisible mountain, making all the martial artists feel heavy. Whoosh! A beam of starlight soared into the sky. Yixing used the fire astrology. Flames of nothingness burned, and the aura of the entire Heavenly Bao Palace became scorching hot. Yixing's cultivation aura burst out. Only then did Pang Zhan discover that Yixing's cultivation had changed. He was actually a king. Astral reaching Venerable breaking through to Astral Sea King was a breakthrough of a major realm, and the increase in strength was huge. Pang Zhan's expression immediately turned serious. When Yixing was a 9th-star Venerable Lord, although there was still a big gap between them, with the Sagittarius Astrology and Black Hole Astrology, the two could be said to be evenly matched. Now, Yixing had become a king, and his strength had increased greatly. Pang Zhan was naturally apprehensive. Whoosh! Whoosh! Pang Zhan acted as if he was facing a great enemy, and used 2 astrology at the same time. One was the Extreme Earth Astrology, and the other was the Saint-level Sky Blade Astrology. Both of their auras were extremely terrifying. They were equivalent to 5-star kings. In the void, the saber intent and the arrow intent collided. Sharp auras cut through the void, and penetrating auras pierced through the void. The faces of the martial artists in the palace changed drastically, and they hurriedly retreated to 2 sides. Pang Zhan's strength was well known. Even in the Star River Palace, there was a 5-star king genius, but he was not Pang Zhan's opponent. Pang Zhan's strength was at least a mid-5-star king. As for this Yixing, who had suddenly appeared, was actually able to contend against Pang Zhan, and forced him to use 2 astrology right from the start. The martial artists who didn't know Yixing were incomparably shocked. They thought to themselves, how could there be such a powerful character in the Dark Star Palace? I've never even heard of him. Yixing didn't use the Sagittarius astrology or black hole astrology. Pang Zhan was overjoyed. His apprehension of Yixing came mainly from those 2 astrology. Die for me. Pang Zhan's aura accumulated to the peak in the blink of an eye, and his strength exploded to the limit. He executed the death blade slash and slashed towards Yixing. The distance between the two was only a few hundred feet. To Pang Zhan, this distance was as close as an eye. Yixing definitely wouldn't be able to dodge this slash. Thinking of this, Pang Zhan sneered in his heart. If they were in a vast space, and Yixing used the 2 astrology, he might not be Yixing's opponent. However, in the Heavenly Bao Palace, Yixing didn't use those 2 astrology, and he would definitely die under his blade. Facing Pang Zhan's slash, Yixing's expression was normal. He didn't even take half a step back, and he didn't even try to dodge. Whoosh! Instead, he faced Pang Zhan's slash and moved his astral force to the limit. The 3 heavenly forces circulated, and the dark, wind, and fire yuan qi gathered at the tip of his finger. They merged with the astral force and astrology to form an arrow. The arrow was aimed at Pang Zhan's head. Pang Zhan sneered. At such a short distance, he made the first move, and Yixing made the second move. This slash was going to split Yixing in half and kill him instantly. Once Yixing died, the arrow attack would naturally disappear, and he wouldn't need to be distracted. In Pang Zhan's opinion, if he was distracted, he would fall into Yixing's trap of fighting with his life on the line. At such a short distance, the 2 of them attacked in less than a tenth of a blink of an eye, and the result was already decided. Pang Zhan's slash was indeed terrifying. Yixing's protective astral force couldn't block it at all, and even his protective inner armor was split open. Yixing's head was split in half. The treasured saber continued downward, cutting through Yixing's chest and reaching near his stomach. Only then did it stop because of his protective inner armor. His head and upper body were split in half. If a king received such an injury, he would definitely die instantly. However, Yixing didn't. Yixing didn't seem to be injured at all. The astral arrow at his fingertip was still as bright as ever. Puff! The astral arrow penetrated Pang Zhan's protective astral force and shot into his head. No! Pang Zhan screamed in horror. His eyes widened as he watched Yixing's finger attack. His eyes were filled with disbelief. He couldn't believe that Yixing could still maintain the power of his astral finger attack even after his head and chest were split open. Pang Zhan's scream was sharp and short. The astral finger arrow shot into his head and exploded, creating a fist-sized hole. The flesh and blood in Pang Zhan's head were instantly destroyed by the energy, turning into mush. Pang Zhan had a middle-grade imperial physique. Even if his head was destroyed, it would be fatal, let alone his head and body being split open. Pang Zhan's body fell backward with a look of disbelief on his face. As for Yixing, the flesh and blood on his upper body and head wriggled. In less than a breath, the 2 halves of his body merged back together, and he was as good as new. Chapter 8:13. The battle between Yixing and Pang Zhan had started and ended quickly. In the blink of an eye, Pang Zhan had died. Most of the martial artists had retreated because of their aura and did not pay much attention. Before they could react, they found that Pang Zhan had died. What was going on? Time had passed too quickly. If they were not paying attention, they would have missed that moment. Many martial artists did not understand how it had turned out like this in the blink of an eye. Whether it was the disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace, the Starry River Divine Palace, or the Radiance Divine Palace, they were all dumbfounded when they saw Pang Zhan dead on the ground. Senior Brother Pang Zhan. After a breath, a disciple of the Radiance Divine Palace finally reacted and exclaimed. Pang Zhan was the first genius disciple of the Radiance Divine Palace in hundreds of years. He had a 6-star blue fate and would definitely become a 6 Nirvana quasi-god in the future. If he was lucky, he might even become a true god. Moreover, Pang Zhan's battle talent was even rarer. He could fight someone 2 levels above him in the king stage. Among his peers, no one could beat him. As the leader of this batch of disciples in the Brilliance Shrine, Pang Zhan could be said to have a bright future. The disciples of the Radiance Divine Palace could not believe that Pang Zhan had died in the Heavenly Bao continent. Especially when the one who killed him was only a 1-star king from the Dark Star Divine Palace. Avenge Senior Brother Pang Zhan. A disciple of the Radiance Divine Palace shouted. Pang Zhan had a strong reputation and appeal among the disciples of the Radiance Divine Palace. His cry for revenge was immediately answered. Avenge Senior Brother Pang Zhan. Avenge Senior Brother Pang Zhan. The disciples of the Radiance Divine Palace shouted loudly. In the Heavenly Bao Palace, there were close to 100 disciples of the Radiance Divine Palace. Even if only half of them were shouting, their aura was enough to topple mountains and overturn seas. Yi Xing snorted. Killing Pang Zhan was just the beginning. He looked around and fixed his eyes on the 3-star Peak King who was shouting the most fiercely. Yi Xing remembered him. He was the disciple of the Brilliance Shrine who had chased after him in the beginning. There were 5 of them at that time, and the other 4 were also by his side. Seeing Yi Xing's eyes fall on him, Wu Kongqing was startled and immediately retreated, trying to get out of the Heavenly Bao Palace. He shouted that he wanted to avenge Pang Zhan, but this was clearly not his true intention. He was afraid that Yi Xing would recognize him, so he wanted to incite the other Radiance Shrine disciples to besiege Yi Xing. It would be best if he could kill Yi Xing, but if he couldn't kill Yi Xing, he could take advantage of the chaos to escape. However, Wu Kongqing did not expect that Yi Xing had fixed his eyes on him in the blink of an eye. Even Pang Zhan had been killed by Yi Xing with only one move. Wu Kongqing did not believe that he could block even one move from Yi Xing. Moreover, although the Radiance Shrine disciples had the advantage in numbers, the Heavenly Bao Palace was too small to make full use of their advantage in numbers. On the contrary, if Yi Xing wanted to start a massacre, he could kill a large number of the Radiance Shrine disciples with only one move. What was more, there were also many disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace here. Although they were under the control of the Radiance Shrine disciples, they would definitely take the opportunity to counterattack when the situation became chaotic. Therefore, as soon as Wu Kongqing saw Yi Xing's eyes fixed on him, he decisively rushed out of the Heavenly Bao Palace. Although Yi Xing would not kill all the disciples of the Radiance Shrine, there were a few people he must kill, such as Wu Kongqing and the other 4 who had chased after him first. The reason why Yi Xing had a deadly feud with the disciples of the Radiance Shrine was that Wu Kongqing and the other 4 had chased after him. As the source of the hatred, Yi Xing certainly had to get rid of them. Although the disciples of the Radiance Shrine were shouting to avenge Pang Zhan with overwhelming momentum, none of them had attacked Yi Xing yet. Yi Xing was able to kill Pang Zhan in one move, so all the disciples of the Radiance Shrine were afraid of him. Only because they had the advantage in numbers did they have the courage to shout for revenge in front of Yi Xing, otherwise, they would have been scared out of their wits. Therefore, when Wu Kongqing ran away, Yi Xing was not restrained at all. At the same time, he moved his body. Breaking through from Venerable to King was not only a great breakthrough in cultivation, but also in comprehension. The higher a martial artist's cultivation was, the higher his comprehension. Therefore, in most cases, only when one's cultivation reached a certain level could he practice martial arts of the same level. Only geniuses with better comprehension than ordinary people could practice martial arts of a higher level. Geniuses with better comprehension than ordinary people would have their comprehension improved when their cultivation broke through. Therefore, once they were one step ahead, they would always be ahead. Yixing was a monstrous genius with better comprehension than ordinary people. After becoming a king, his comprehension had improved greatly, and he had made great progress in all kinds of comprehension. For example, Yixing had already comprehended the perfection of force of darkness, wind, and fire, but now he had reached a higher level and touched the true meaning of the three great Taos of heaven and earth. Above force was the conception. Even for a high-level king, it was difficult to comprehend the true meaning of Tao, and it would take a long time to reach this level. Yixing operated the wind wheel, and his speed was so fast that it was almost like teleportation in the heavenly Bao Palace. Wukongqing's speed was fast enough, but Yixing was even faster. When Wukongqing rushed to the gate of the palace, Yixing had already blocked his way and pointed out a finger. A beam of finger aura shot out, aiming at Wukongqing's head. At this moment, Wukongqing was rushing out of the heavenly Bao Palace with all his strength. Yixing suddenly stopped in front of him and pointed out a finger. Wukongqing's head seemed to bump into the beam of finger aura. When Wukongqing realized what had happened, it was already too late. Although he had stopped moving at the critical moment, the astral protective shield was even faster than he was. In an instant, it had pierced through his astral protective shield and shot into his head. After breaking through to the Star Sea realm and going through the Thunder Trial, Yixing's body had improved greatly, and his martial will had also been tempered in pain, and his arrow intent had been strengthened greatly. The stronger arrow intent and the true meaning of Tao level, together with the King's Star aura inside Yixing's body and his perfect King's body, maximized the effect of the attack. As a result, the beam of finger aura shot out by Yixing had reached the level of a 5-star king. Even Pang Zhan, who had the strength of a 5-star king, was killed instantly when his head was hit by Yixing's beam of finger aura. Wukongqing naturally could not bear the attack of Yixing's beam of finger aura. A fist-sized hole was made in Wukongqing's head by the beam of finger aura. The inside of his head was completely destroyed, and he fell to the ground instantly, with a frightened look on his face. The death of Pang Zhan and Wukongqing completely destroyed the defense line among the disciples of the Brilliance Palace. The fear of Yixing took over, and they all fled out of the palace. Swoosh! 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 All of a sudden, Yixing launched a series of attacks. The other 4 people who had been chasing him together with Wukongqing were all killed in less than a breath. Chapter 8:15. Xing Yan looked at Yixing and said, "Even if we can't open it, do you think you can?" "Senior brother Yi, the Dark Star Divine Palace already has half of the stone cabinets, yet you still want to take the other half that belongs to my Star River Divine Palace. Isn't your appetite too big?" Yixing said, "You're right, I can open these forbidding formations, and I have some treasures that belong to Senior Luo Tiangong. Now that I'm able to take them out, yet you're still occupying the latrine without taking a shit. I don't think that's a good idea." All the disciples of the Star River Divine Palace were shocked. Even the disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace were no exception. They knew how difficult it was to open the seals on the stone cabinets. They had so many kings and worked hard for a month, but they still couldn't open them. They didn't even have a clue. However, Yixing said that he could open these seals. Of course, everyone was shocked. Xing Yan was shocked. He looked at Yixing doubtfully and said, "Can you really open these seals?" Yixing nodded. In the heavenly Bao continent, Yixing was invincible. He could open the seals on the stone cabinets in the heavenly Bao hall without fear of anyone knowing. Xing Yan's eyes were burning with desire. He took a deep breath and said, "Senior brother Yi, if you can open these seals, we can split the stone cabinets with you. You can open all the stone cabinets and half of them will belong to you." Yixing smiled faintly and said, "Are you kidding?" Strictly speaking, Yixing was Luo Tiangong's chosen successor. The treasures of the Heavenly Bao continent belonged to Yixing. However, Yixing didn't intend to reveal his identity as Luo Tiangong's successor to the public. Although people would guess, guesses were just guesses. Even if these treasures were ownerless, they would belong to whoever obtained them first. Now, the disciples of the Star River Divine Palace didn't get these treasures. It was impossible for them to get these treasures. Therefore, Yixing was the first person to get these treasures after breaking the seals on the stone cabinets. No matter how you looked at it, these treasures belonged to Yixing. It was Yixing who had opened the seal, so the treasures he obtained belonged to him. Yet, Xing Yan wanted half of it. How could there be such a logic in this world? Xing Yan also knew that his request was a bit excessive. Seeing Yixing's expression change, he hurriedly changed his tone. "If you're not satisfied with a 50-50 split, then we'll split it 30-70. I'll take 30, and you take 70. 15 stone cabinets, and we only need 5. You can have the other 10. Yixing continued to smile and said, "These stone cabinets don't belong to the Divine Palace of Star River. I opened them. Why should I share them with you?" Although Yixing's words weren't without reason, Xing Yan was still enraged when he saw so many treasures before his eyes, yet he couldn't obtain any of them. Just as Xing Yan was about to explode, Yixing changed the topic and said, "However, treasures should be shared with those who see them. You must feel unbalanced when you see so many treasures in front of your eyes. How about this? I'll open all the stone cabinets, and then I'll give you one of them. What do you think?" A single stone cabinet contained 3 God-tier treasures and several top-level mystic-tier treasures. There were more than 10 of them. For a low-level king, this was already a huge treasure trove. Originally, the Divine Palace of Star River wouldn't be able to obtain anything. When the time came, they could only leave the Heavenly Bao continent with their tails between their legs. Now, Yixing was giving them a stone cabinet full of treasures. This was equivalent to giving them a huge treasure trove. Logically speaking, this should make them go wild with joy. However, people's hearts didn't always follow logic. Besides logic, there were many other factors that could affect people's hearts. Moreover, for most people, these factors had a greater impact on their hearts than logic. For example, jealousy, unbalanced feelings, loyalty, hobbies, and so on. At this moment, Xing Yan's heart was extremely unbalanced. If there were only 2 or 3 stone cabinets, Yixing would give one to the Divine Palace of Star River, and he would be grateful. However, there were 30 stone cabinets in the Heavenly Bao Palace, and Yixing only gave one to the Divine Palace of Star River. This made him extremely unhappy. This was because he was jealous of the Divine Palace of Star River's 29 stone cabinets. Therefore, he felt extremely unbalanced. Xing Yan said angrily, "1 stone cabinet. Are you trying to dismiss a beggar? 5 stone cabinets, that's my bottom line." Yixing's face turned cold and said, "It seems like you don't understand the situation. You only have 2 choices. 1, you won't get anything. 2, you can get one of the treasures in the stone cabinet. There's no third choice." Looking at Yixing's aura that was about to explode, a hint of fear flashed in Xing Yan's eyes. However, it was more of greed. Xing Yan's gaze swept across the stone cabinets in the palace. Looking at the treasures in the stone cabinets, his greed overcame his fear. Xing Yan gritted his teeth and said, "Without 5 stone cabinets, I won't give up any of the 15 stone cabinets that belong to the Divine Palace of Star River." Yixing smiled disdainfully and said, "Belong to the divine palace of Star River. You dare to say such words in the Heavenly Bao Palace. Aren't you afraid that Senior Luo Tiangong will leave behind some tricks to crush you?" Xing Yan's heart skipped a beat. He was indeed afraid of Luo Tiangong's reputation. Although true God experts stood at the peak of martial arts in the flowing light world and led the era, there were still quite a number of true God experts accumulated over time. When they were still alive, true God experts could be said to be able to call the wind and summon the rain in the flowing light world. However, there were not many of them who could leave behind a name after death. Luo Tiangong was one of them who left behind a name after death. Although he had been dead for 20,000 years, his name was still known throughout the world. Xing Yan felt that he should give Luo Tiangong an explanation. He said, "Senior Luo Tiangong left the Heavenly Bao continent for the benefit of future generations. He left the treasures inside for future generations to discover. Now that we have found these stone cabinets, they naturally belong to us." The first cultivator who entered the Heavenly Bao continent said that the entire Heavenly Bao continent belonged to him. Yixing smiled coldly and said, "I can't be bothered to waste my breath on you. You still have 1.5 days to continue trying to open the restrictions on the stone cabinets. Once you have opened the restrictions, the treasures inside will naturally belong to you. If you still haven't opened the restrictions by tomorrow afternoon, you'd better leave on your own accord. Otherwise, I will personally ask you to leave." After saying that, Yixing turned around. He had already given them an ultimatum. He did not want to waste his breath on them. When the time was up, if they did not leave, he would chase them away. "Senior Brother Yi, can you really open the restrictions on the stone cabinets?" As soon as Yixing returned to the disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace, a large number of disciples asked him about it. Their eyes were shining brightly. The treasures in the stone cabinets were too precious. Obtaining a single treasure in the stone cabinets was a huge gain. As for the treasures in the stone cabinets, they were even more precious than all the treasures produced in the Heavenly Bao continent for the past 200 years. When they heard Yixing say that he could open the restrictions on the stone cabinets, which disciple of the Dark Star Divine Palace would not be excited? Chapter 8:16. Yixing nodded and walked to the front of a stone cabinet. The disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace immediately gathered around and looked at Yixing eagerly. Yixing glanced at the disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace. Most of them did not react, but there were still some who understood. Tu Qianzhang shouted, "Be careful, there are outsiders here." The disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace immediately reacted. In the Heavenly Bao Hall, there were still disciples of the Star River Divine Palace eyeing them covetously. Because of Yixing's strength, they had neglected the disciples of the Star River Divine Palace. However, the temptation of the treasures in the stone cabinet was too great. If Yixing opened the seal of the stone cabinet, the disciples of the Star River Divine Palace might attack him out of greed. Once a group had a backbone, it would be cohesive. The disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace were not as united as the disciples of the Star River Divine Palace and the Radiance Divine Palace, but they lacked a backbone. Now that Yixing had become the backbone of the disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace, the unity of the disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace naturally increased. Without needing Yixing to deliberately remind them, they turned their attention to the disciples of the Star River Divine Palace and took precautions. Even if the disciples of the Star River Divine Palace wanted to sneak up on them, they would not succeed. Yixing stood in front of the stone cabinet and opened his martial Dao Heavenly Eye, revealing an eye full of runes. He activated the God's Void Breaker Eye. The wall in front of him suddenly turned transparent under the gaze of the God's Void Breaker Eye. On the wall, the restriction that covered the stone cabinet, under the gaze of Yixing's God's Void Breaker Eye, wisps of energy moved and could be seen clearly. Yixing soon saw through the entire structure of the restriction. If a restriction could be compared to a lock, then breaking the restriction by force was like smashing the lock open. Yixing had seen through the entire structure of the restriction, which was equivalent to finding the way to open the lock. It was like having a key in his hand. When a lock was big enough and strong enough, breaking it by force was impossible. However, with a key, it was easy to open it. Yixing took a step forward, stretched out his hand, and pressed it on the invisible restriction in front of the stone cabinet. Yixing circulated his astral energy, and strands of astral energy shot out from his palm like fine threads. The restriction outside the stone cabinet was extremely complicated and tight. If one were to carelessly infuse astral energy into it, it would definitely be blocked. However, Yixing had scanned every inch of space in the restrictive spell and knew where there were gaps that could allow astral energy to pass through. These cracks were as thin as a strand of hair, and they were twisted and turned. If one couldn't see them clearly, it would be impossible for one to infuse one's astral energy through them. However, with the help of the void-breaking god eyes, the impossible became possible. Yixing was very clear about the structure of the restriction. Strands of thread-like astral energy were controlled by Yixing and penetrated layer after layer of the restriction. The restriction wasn't solid, but was made of energy. The strands of energy were like threads, weaving into a dense net. No matter how complicated the net was, no matter how long the threads were, there was only one source. As long as the source was destroyed, the entire restriction could be destroyed. Yixing's palm was only half a meter away from the stone cabinet, which meant that the thickness of the restriction was only half a meter. However, this half-meter thickness had tens of thousands of layers. If it was a blind cat running into a dead mouse, it was still possible to penetrate through several layers, or even a dozen layers. However, it was impossible to penetrate through tens of thousands of layers just by relying on luck. Only Yixing, who had the shattering void divine palace, could see the inside of the barriers clearly, and could control the astral energy to quickly penetrate through layers of barriers. After spending 15 minutes, Yixing's astral energy threads had penetrated through all the layers and reached the inside of the restriction, finding the source. Even if the astral energy was as thin as a thread, the power it contained was still shocking. Especially the arrow intent it contained, it had an extreme penetrating power. Under Yixing's control, the astral energy threads immediately pierced into the source of the restriction and destroyed it. With the source destroyed, the restriction collapsed from the inside out. Soon, it was completely destroyed and disappeared without a trace. However, the restriction was invisible and the process could not be seen with the naked eye. The rest of the people only saw Yixing pressing his hand into the void. They did not know that the restriction in front of Yixing had changed. When the restriction was completely destroyed, Yixing took a step forward and walked directly to the stone cabinet. He stretched out his hand and touched a treasure in the stone cabinet. The restriction is gone. It's really been broken. The disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace immediately cheered excitedly. However, even so, they did not let down their guard against the disciples of the Starry River Divine Palace. This was often the most dangerous time. The disciples of the Starry River Divine Palace looked at each other with envy and jealousy. The stone cabinet was right in front of them and the treasure inside seemed to be within reach. However, when they really stretched out their hand and were about half a meter away from the stone cabinet, they would be blocked by the invisible restriction. The disciples of the Starry River Divine Palace had used all kinds of methods. They had forcefully attacked it and used array masters to break it, but to no avail. Now, when they saw Yixing open the restrictions on the stone cabinet and touch the treasures in the stone cabinet, they could only sigh and feel very upset. It was not that Ming Yan did not want to sneak up on Yixing and steal the treasure. However, he knew very well that although Yixing seemed to be focused on breaking the restriction, there was actually a penetrating aura that was watching him. Obviously, as long as Ming Yan did anything, he would not be able to hide it from Yixing. Ming Yan obviously wanted to sneak up on Yixing. However, sneaking up on the other disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace was meaningless. He was only afraid of Yixing. Unless he killed Yixing with a sneak attack, he would not be able to steal the other party's treasure. Instead, he would be sending himself to his death. Ming Yan knew very well that if he dared to make a move, Yixing would definitely not spare his life. Therefore, Ming Yan did not dare to make a move. Moreover, even if he wanted to sneak up on Yixing, it would not be now. He would have to wait until Yixing opened all the stone cabinets. Otherwise, even if he succeeded, he would only be able to obtain the treasure in one of the stone cabinets. Wouldn't that be the same as what Yixing had promised? After opening the stone cabinets, Yixing waved his hand and put all the treasures in the stone cabinets into his storage ring. Seeing Yixing put away all the treasures, although the disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace were a little envious, no one said anything. Yixing walked to the next stone cabinet and continued to break the restriction. After 15 minutes, the restriction was broken and Yixing took away the treasures in the stone cabinets. One by one, the restrictions on the stone cabinets were broken by Yixing. The treasures inside were all taken away by Yixing. 4 hours later, the 15 stone cabinets on the right side of the Heavenly Bao Palace had their restrictions broken by Yixing. All the treasures were taken away by him. In other words, Yixing had obtained a total of 45 God-grade treasures and more than 100 mystic-grade treasures. This was more than all the treasures of many 4-star forces combined. Chapter 8:17. The disciples of the Starry River Sacred Hall looked at Yixing with red eyes and short breaths. They were extremely jealous. Even the disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace couldn't help but feel jealous, let alone the disciples of the Star River Divine Palace. So many treasures were worth a fortune to a quasi-god. Even if they worked hard for their entire lives, they wouldn't be able to obtain them. Perhaps only a true god expert would treat them as normal. Yixing had been paying attention to Xing Yan. He could feel the struggle in Xing Yan's heart. But in the end, Xing Yan didn't make a move. Yixing had killed Pang Zhan in one move. He was indeed powerful, and Xing Yan was afraid. "You're wise," Yixing thought to himself. Looking at the disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace who were staring at him, Yixing said, "Every disciple here will have a share of the treasures in the palace. Every disciple will get a stone cabinet of treasures." "Thank you, Senior Brother Yixing." "Long live Senior Brother Yixing." The disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace were overjoyed and immediately cheered. Although Yixing meant that every disciple would get a stone cabinet of treasures and the rest would belong to him, none of the disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace thought otherwise. It was Yixing who had opened the seals on the stone cabinets. Strictly speaking, these treasures belonged to Yixing. There were 10 peaks in the outer sanctum of the Dark Star Divine Palace, and each peak had a stone cabinet. Yixing had given them 10 stone cabinets of treasures. What else could the disciples say? There was only gratitude and excitement. Yixing said, "I'll keep the treasures first. After I open all the stone cabinets, I'll distribute them to you." The disciples of the Star River Divine Palace were still in the Heavenly Bao Hall. The treasures were with Yixing, so Yixing wasn't afraid of them. However, if the treasures were with other disciples, it would be a different story. The Heavenly Bao Hall was small, and there were many people. Once chaos broke out, Yixing would not be able to control the situation. If all the disciples of the Star River Deity Temple were to join the fray, the other party would snatch the treasures and run away, and Yixing would not be able to stop them one by one. However, as long as the treasure was with Yixing, the Star River Temple's disciples would never be able to snatch it away. Therefore, Yixing had to keep it with him first. The disciples thought for a moment and understood this logic. They said in unison, "We will listen to Senior Marshal Brother Yixing's instructions." Yixing looked at Xing Yan and said, "Don't say I didn't give you a chance. You still have a day or so. Tomorrow afternoon, if you don't leave, I will personally ask you to leave." Yixing had his own principles when it came to dealing with people. He would not completely deprive the Star River Temple's disciples of the opportunity to obtain the treasures and chase them out directly. However, he would not allow them to occupy the latrine without taking **T. When the time was up, he would snatch what should be snatched, even if he had to use force. Time passed. The disciples of the Starry River Sacred Hall tried all sorts of methods to break the restrictions around the 15 stone cabinets, but they couldn't break them. The time limit that Yixing had given them was getting closer and closer. Yixing was surrounded by the Star River Temple's disciples. He looked at the Star River Temple's disciples indifferently, waiting for the time to be up so that he could chase them out by force. Xing Yan's face became uglier and uglier. He could not accept the fact that he did not even get a single piece of treasure after so many treasures. Seeing that noon was almost up, Xing Yan said, "Yixing, we only need 3 stone cabinets. If you give us 3 treasures, we will give you all of them." Yixing chuckled and couldn't be bothered to respond. He didn't even want to waste his breath. Xing Yan gritted his teeth and shouted, "2. We only need 2 stone cabinets." Yixing still ignored him. Xing Yan panted heavily. He was very emotional as he shouted, "Fine, 1 then." The Star River Temple's disciples laughed. Xing Yan did not even have a single bargaining chip, yet he dared to negotiate with Yixing. He was definitely asking for trouble. Yixing did not change his mind because of Xing Yan's compromise. He still ignored Xing Yan. Xing Yan shouted, "Yixing, quickly open the seals and give us one of the stone cabinets. We will leave immediately." Yixing's gaze finally fell on Xing Yan. He said, "Time's up. You should leave." Xing Yan said angrily, "You tricked me. You said you would give us 1 stone cabinet." Yixing said, "That was then and this is now. I have given you a chance, but there is only 1 chance. You missed it." Xing Yan's aura suddenly became violent. He clenched his fists like an angry lion, as if he was going to pounce on Yixing at any time. The Star River Temple's disciples were invigorated, and their auras surged. Yixing's expression was still as usual. He looked at Xing Yan and said indifferently, "I will only count to 10. After that, if there are any Star River Temple's disciples in the Heavenly Bao Palace, I will kill them without mercy." Although Yixing's voice was soft, it was like thunder in the ears of the Star River Temple's disciples. Fear immediately appeared on their faces. 1, 2, 3. Yixing began to count. He counted every breath. When Yixing counted to 3, the Star River Temple's disciples had already rushed out of the palace. Xing Yan's face was extremely ugly. 4, 5. With the first to escape, there was naturally a second, and a third. When Yixing counted to 5, there were already more than 10 Star River Temple's disciples running out of the palace. Moreover, there were even more who were preparing to follow. Go! When Xing Yan saw this, he knew that he could not compete with Yixing in the Heavenly Bao Palace, so he could only retreat. Following Xing Yan's order, the Star River Temple's disciples sped up and rushed out of the palace. In just a few breaths' time, there was not a single Star River Temple's disciple left in the Heavenly Bao Palace. Xing Yan's voice came from outside the palace, "Yixing, just you wait. You will not have a good ending if you offend the Star River Temple." Yixing treated Xing Yan's threat as a fart. He did not take it to heart at all. His gaze had already landed on the 15 stone cabinets in front of him. 4 hours later, the restrictions on the 15 stone cabinets were all opened by Yixing. The treasures inside were all kept by Yixing. Then, Yixing gathered all the Dark Star Temple's disciples together and began to distribute the treasures. There were about 70 disciples in the Dark Star Temple. There were disciples from each peak. Yixing gave each peak's disciple a stone cabinet of treasures and said, "Although these treasures are with you, they do not belong to you. They belong to each peak's disciple. After you hand them over to the temple, the contribution points obtained will be divided equally among the disciples of each peak." All the disciples said in unison, "Yes, Senior Brother Yixing." Yixing said, "The treasures in the other 20 stone cabinets belong to me. Do you have any objections?" All the disciples shook their heads. Chapter 8:19. Gai Qing used his eye technique to look into the distance and said, "No, Yixing is very far away, at least a few 100,000 miles away. However, he seems to have cultivated an extremely powerful eye technique and should be watching this place." The only person Xing Yan was afraid of was Yixing. Knowing that Yixing was still a few 100,000 miles away, Xing Yan was relieved. Xing Yan sneered, "What a good kill without mercy. Very good. I will also count to 10. After 10 counts, if you still don't hand over your treasures, I will also kill you without mercy. In front of me, you are just a bunch of clay chickens and pottery dogs. I can easily kill you until your corpses litter the ground and you piss your pants in terror." Gao Jian ignored Xing Yan's sneer and started counting. 1. "Senior Brother Gao Jian, what's going on?" Immediately, a large number of Dark Star Divine Palace disciples asked Gao Jian through voice transmission. Gao Jian transmitted his voice to a few key disciples. "Don't worry, Senior Brother Yixing has made arrangements." These key disciples also transmitted their voice to the other disciples. After knowing that it was Yixing's arrangement, they were relieved despite their doubts. 1. A confident smile hung on Xing Yan's face as he followed Gao Jian and started counting as well. 2. 2. 3. 3. As the numbers were getting closer to 10, both sides' auras became more and more intense. Both sides' disciples exploded with violent auras. A great battle was about to break out. The Dark Star Divine Palace disciples were full of confidence after knowing that Yixing had made arrangements. The Star River Divine Palace disciples were also relieved after knowing that Yixing was a few 100,000 miles away. Both sides were confident that they could defeat the other. 9. Gao Jian's eyes narrowed, and his gaze sharpened. 9. Xing Yan was still smiling. Other than Yixing, no one was his match. Knowing that Yixing was a few 100,000 miles away, Xing Yan was not worried at all. Gao Jian looked at Xing Yan with murderous eyes and shouted, "Since you want to die, I will fulfill your wish." 10. Hee hee. Xing Yan shrugged. His expression was relaxed as he expressed his disdain. Whoosh, however, at this moment, a ripple suddenly appeared in the space in front of Xing Yan. A silvery white arrow shot out from the center of the ripple and shot towards Xing Yan. Just as Xing Yan was about to count to 10, his disdainful smile froze on his face. His eyes were instantly filled with fear. This arrow had appeared too suddenly, completely outside of Xing Yan's expectations. At this moment, he was completely unprepared. The speed of the arrow was too fast, like a flash of light. Moreover, the arrow was too close to the star flame, less than 100 meters away. With such speed and such a short distance, Xing Yan had no time to react. Poof! As time was limited, the disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace did not pursue the disciples of the Star River Divine Palace who had escaped. Instead, they collected the storage rings left behind by the dead disciples of the Star River Divine Palace. After distributing them, they continued south, returning to the entrance of the Dark Star continent. In the distant eastern part of the Heavenly Bow continent, Yixing used his god's eyes of Void Breaker to observe everything from afar. The result was exactly as he had expected. He had expected that the Starry River Temple disciples would be scared out of their wits after Xing Yan's death. He had let Gao Jian roar the word "kill," which was enough to make them flee. Once they fled, they would be like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Heavy losses were inevitable. Seeing that the Dark Star Divine Hall's disciples were on their way back, Yixing looked away. The Starry River Divine Hall's disciples were no longer a threat after their defeat. Without Pang Zhan, the Radiance Divine Hall's disciples wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. As for the Dark Star Divine Hall's disciples, they didn't need to worry about them. The spatial crack that led to the Star Mainland was located at the eastern edge of the Heavenly Bow continent. Yixing followed the route that Zhuo Hongyuan had taken and found the spatial crack without much effort. At this time, the Dark Star Temple disciples had also arrived at the entrance of the Dark Star Mainland and gathered with the other Dark Star Temple disciples. Yixing used his god's eyes of Void Breaker to watch the Dark Star Temple disciples leave the Heavenly Bow continent through the Void Door. He retracted his gaze and walked toward the spatial crack in front of him. The energy in the spatial crack was very chaotic. Yixing could feel an inexplicable danger in it. However, since Zhuo Hongyuan could pass through it, Yixing was confident that he could pass through it as well. Chapter 820. The space crack was like a hideous wound in the void. It was also like the mouth of a demon, swallowing all the energy around it. When Yixing was still a dozen miles away from the space crack, he felt an invisible suction force pulling him closer to the space crack. As he got closer and closer to the spatial crack, the invisible suction force became stronger and stronger. In the beginning, Yixing was still able to forcefully control his body. However, when he was only about 100 meters away from the spatial crack, the suction force of the spatial crack exceeded his ability to control himself. Whoosh! Yixing was like a sharp arrow, sucked into the space crack in an instant by the invisible suction force. In the space crack, there was a void torrent that brought Yixing's body forward rapidly. It was like an ordinary person falling into a surging river. He could not control his body and could only go with the flow. The difference was that ordinary people would drown in the surging river. However, Yixing was a king. Although he could not escape the void torrent, he would not suffocate because of it. However, there were dangers in the void torrent that could kill a king. In less than 10 breaths after entering the space crack, Yixing felt pain in his body. It was as if he had been cut by a sharp blade. A deep wound appeared on his body, and even his bones were broken. It was the space wind blade hidden in the void torrent. The space wind blade was extremely sharp, and the speed of the void torrent was fast. Therefore, once it came into contact with the space wind blade, one's body would be injured. Even the black level upper grade inner armor could not withstand it. Zhuo Hongyuan had arrived at the star continent through the space crack. However, he had been seriously injured and had not recovered. His cultivation had remained at the two-star king realm. He had not made any progress in his life. A king realm had a lifespan of 1,000 years. However, Zhuo Hongyuan had only lived for a few hundred years before he died. It was because he had been seriously injured while traveling through the space crack. It had damaged his life source. Zhuo Hongyuan was a genius at the same level as Pang Zhan, Xing Yan, and Zhuo Fifan. When he was in the king realm, he could fight opponents 2 levels higher than him. Moreover, he had built a middle-grade king body. He was 1 in 100,000 kings. But Yixing was different. Yixing had constructed a top-grade imperial body, and had an undying body. His survivability was thousands of times stronger than Zhuo Hongyuan's. The wounds on Yixing's body healed in the blink of an eye. With the self-healing effect of his top-grade imperial body, his wounds were completely healed, leaving no scars behind. There were many spatial wind blades hidden in the void torrent. Whether one was lucky or not, one would always encounter some. If one was lucky, one would encounter fewer spatial wind blades. If one was unlucky, one would encounter more. Shuo Hongyuan was lucky that he hadn't been killed by the spatial wind blades in the torrent of space. At least, he was much luckier than Yixing. At least a dozen breaths of time, at most a few dozen breaths of time, Yixing would always come into contact with the spatial wind blades. Injuries to his body were a small matter. Once, a spatial wind blade just so happened to slash across Yixing's neck, directly chopping off his head. If Shuo Hongyuan had encountered such an experience, he would have died instantly. Fortunately, Yixing had an undying body. Even if his head was chopped off, his flesh and blood would regenerate, and he would recover to his original state. In the torrent of space, he bumped into the spatial wind blades for almost half an hour. Suddenly, the surrounding temperature changed, becoming incomparably hot. Yixing was surrounded by raging flames. Just a moment ago, Yixing had left the torrent of space, but now he had entered a torrent of flames. Perhaps Yixing was still in the same torrent, but this torrent had different forms in different locations. The area Yixing had passed through before was a torrent of space, but now the area he was in was a torrent of flames. As for what was going on, Yixing could only guess. He didn't have a definite answer in his heart. But one thing was certain, for Yixing, it was much safer to be in a torrent of flames than in a torrent of space. The danger in the torrent of space came from the spatial wind blades, but there was also danger in the torrent of flames, which came from the special flames hidden in the torrent of flames. Yixing had the flame astral aspect and the star fire seed in his body. Facing these foreign flames, his defensive power was the strongest. Yixing used the flame astral aspect and at the same time stimulated the star fire seed in his Dantian star vortex, laying down a double defense outside his body. Whether it was ordinary foreign flames or special flames, they could all be blocked by these two layers of defense. Whoosh! A black starlight rushed out from between Yixing's eyebrows. Yixing had used the black hole astral aspect again. In the torrent of flames, there was an endless supply of foreign flames, and there were also many powerful special flames. For Yixing, this was not a dangerous place, but a place of great treasure. Yixing's star fire seed and flame astral aspect could be upgraded by absorbing the flame energy here. The black hole astral aspect followed Yixing through the torrent of flames, producing a huge devouring power that swallowed the surrounding flame energy and strengthened the flame astral aspect. The star fire seed in his Dantian star vortex also instinctively absorbed the foreign flames from all directions. Yixing's star fire seed originally came from the foreign flames that fell on the star continent. Now that Yixing was passing through the void crack and traveling through the starry sky, the endless foreign flames were the best supplement for the star fire seed. Traveling through the torrent of flames, Yixing was in a good mood. He only hoped that he could travel a little longer, so that his star fire seed and flame astral aspect could absorb enough flame energy and have a qualitative breakthrough. According to the description in Zhuo Hongyuan's notes, the torrent of flames would last for an hour, and then they would arrive at the space where the star continent was. There was a large area of unstable void there, and it was easy to tear space. Through tearing space, one could reach the star continent. Under normal circumstances, tearing space was extremely difficult. Only true god experts or peerless geniuses among quasi-gods could do it. However, the tearing space caused a part of the space in the star continent to be unstable, which allowed even kings to tear space. Shuo Hongyuan was only a 4-star king, but he could tear space and reach the star continent. This was naturally not a problem for Yixing. Yixing divided his attention into 3 tasks. On one hand, he controlled the black hole astral aspect to absorb the flame energy to strengthen it. On the other hand, he controlled the starfire seed to absorb the flame energy to strengthen it. On the other hand, he calculated the passage of time. After only a quarter of an hour, Yixing's flame astrological aspect had undergone a qualitative change. In the starry crescent land, the flame astral aspect and the heavenly flame ancient land had reached the limit of the extreme grade astral aspect due to the black hole astral aspect's absorption of the flame energy. It was only one step away from evolving to the saint grade astral aspect. However, because the flame energy in the heavenly flame ancient land was not strong enough, it did not succeed. Now, there were foreign flames everywhere, and the flame energy was strong enough. Yixing's flame astral aspect naturally underwent a qualitative change very quickly. On the flame astral aspect, a flame divine bird vaguely appeared. It had evolved into the saint grade astral aspect, the vermilion bird astral aspect. Chapter 8:21. The evolution of the fire astrological aspect from the extreme grade to the saint grade was a qualitative breakthrough, and its power had increased greatly. In the space between his eyebrows, the fire astrological aspect was no longer in a corner. Instead, it had squeezed into the middle. Although it was still unable to compete with the Sagittarius and black hole astrological aspects, it was already on the verge of contending with them. The black hole astrological aspect continued to devour the fire energy, strengthening the vermilion bird astrological aspect that had already evolved. Within the fire astrological aspect, the vermilion bird's figure gradually became clearer as it absorbed more and more fire energy. It looked like it was about to soar into the sky. This meant that even though it had evolved into the vermilion bird astrological aspect, its power was still increasing. This could be seen from the fact that the vermilion bird astrological aspect was getting closer and closer to the Sagittarius and black hole astrological aspects in the center. Although the vermilion bird astrological aspect's power would increase as it absorbed more fire energy, there wouldn't be a qualitative change. Yixing's focus shifted to the starfire seed. As Yixing pushed the starfire seed's ability to absorb fire energy became stronger and faster. Finally, an hour ago, the starfire seed's grade had also increased qualitatively. Its size was clearly one size larger, and its power was more than 10 times stronger. Before, the starfire seed's power could only threaten ordinary kings. Now, Yixing was sure that even high-level kings wouldn't be able to withstand the burning power of the starfire seed. Although the starfire seed didn't pose any real threat to high-level monarchs as long as it didn't burn their bodies, having such a power in their bodies would still be useful at crucial moments. An hour later, Yixing felt the space around him weakening. Clearly, he had arrived at the space where the star continent was. Yixing didn't hesitate. He circulated the dark wind fire arrow art. The astral energy in his body, darkness, wind, and fire yuan qi gathered at the tip of his finger, forming a black astral arrow. Break! Yixing attacked with all his strength. Using his body as an arrow, he instantly pierced through the torrent of fire and landed on the edge of the torrent. Within the torrent of flames, Yixing was unable to go against the power of the torrent. However, he could still move left and right along with the torrent. With the arrow well attached to his body, Yixing's body shuttled through the void as fast as lightning. In the blink of an eye, the astral finger arrow collided with the spatial barrier at the edge of the torrent of flames. If it had been an intact spatial barrier, then even a normal quasi-god wouldn't have been able to break through it. However, the space here was weak, and its strength had decreased by more than 100 times. Even Zhuo Hongyuan had been able to break through it in the past, so what more Yixing? The astral finger arrow pierced through the thin spatial barrier and tore a huge crack in it in the blink of an eye. Crash! Yixing rushed out of the spatial rift, wreathed in a large amount of foreign flames. The torrent of flames was like a surging river. The sudden appearance of the spatial crack was like a hole at the bottom of the river. Naturally, the water in the river would be repelled by the hole at the bottom of the river, and the flames in the torrent of flames were the same. Therefore, Yixing rushed out of the spatial crack not only because of the impact of his own power, but also because of the expulsion of the torrent of flames. Yixing suddenly accelerated. Before he could control his body, he was squeezed out of the torrent of flames. He appeared in the sky above the star continent and fell heavily to the ground. He fell from a height of several thousand meters in the blink of an eye. Yixing hit the ground hard and felt a sharp pain in his internal organs. Clearly, they had been damaged. A large amount of foreign flame fell and landed on the ground, covering a radius of several hundred meters. In an instant, the surrounding flowers and trees were burned to ashes. Even the soil and stones on the ground were burned away. The star continent was a complete starry sky continent. Its laws were very complete. The spatial crack in the sky only appeared in the blink of an eye. Under the power of the laws, it was quickly mended and returned to normal. Yixing, who was on the ground, and a large expanse of extraterrestrial flames, proved what had just happened. Compared to the immortal body, the damage to the internal organs was only a minor injury. They recovered in the blink of an eye. Yixing stood up and took a step forward. He rushed out of the flames and appeared in the sky. Yixing's eyes swept across the land in front of him. His face was filled with excitement and excitement. He was back. He was finally back. What entered his eyes were lofty mountains and hills. It was indeed very similar to the Green Cloud Mountain Range. Yixing opened his martial Dao heavenly eye and used his void-breaking God eyes. His eyes immediately looked forward. Not long after, Yixing was shocked and surprised. Yes, this was indeed the Green Cloud Mountain Range. He saw the old site of the Green Cloud sect and the square outside the Green Cloud Ancient Land. Back then, he had explored the Green Cloud Ancient Land with the genius disciples of the various sects in the Green Cloud region. At that time, he was only a celestial vortex realm marquis. Now, he was already a ruler of the Star Ocean. He did not know the cultivation of the genius disciples who explored the Green Cloud Ancient Land with him. Most of them were probably still celestial vortex realm marquis. Some of them were at most astral dipper realm enlightened persons. Their life experiences were different. Yixing was already in a different world from them. After confirming that this was the Green Cloud Mountain Range and that he had indeed returned to the Star Land, Yixing was even more delighted and excited. Since 2 years ago, Yixing had been forced to use the Great Space Breaching Talisman to leave the Star Land under the Supreme King Meng Tai's saber. Yixing had always wanted to return. He had been waiting for this day for a long time. Now that his wish had finally come true, he was naturally very excited. 2 years ago, he was forced to leave by Meng Tai in the Green Cloud Mountain Range. 2 years later, he returned to the Star Land and was still in the Green Cloud Mountain Range. 2 years ago, he was only a 7-star reverend. He could not withstand a single blow from Meng Tai. 2 years later, he was already a 1-star king. A mere Meng Tai was no longer in his eyes. At the same place, at a different time, Yixing's cultivation and strength had undergone an earth-shattering change. After 2 years, Yixing returned to the Star Land once again. There was no more pain in his heart. There was no more resentment. There was only joy. Today, he would pay back the enmity of the past with double. There was only joy in his heart. Moreover, Yixing's thoughts quickly shifted to Wei Qingxian. That flawless face appeared in Yixing's mind. Although they had not seen each other for 2 years, it was still very clear. He had not forgotten it at all. Qingxian, I'm back. How have you been these 2 years? Yixing thought silently. At the same time, he confirmed the direction and looked in the direction of the Dark Star sect with his void-breaking God eye. The void-breaking God eye pierced through the void. Yixing's heart had already flown towards the Dark Star sect. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.